تو السلام علیکم، ویلکم ٹو ایوری ون. میں ہوں گلال اسماعیل، اور آج ہم جو جمع ہے کیونکہ آج میرے والد صاحب پروفیسر محمد اسماعیل کی گرفتاری کو 1 مہینہ ہو چکا ہے. ہم جانتے ہیں کہ وہ اس لیے آج جیل کی سلاخوں کے پیچھے ہیں کیونکہ ایک تو وہ خود ہمیشہ ایک نڈر اور بے باک انسانی حقوق کے ایکٹیوسٹ رہے ہیں، ہمیشہ بات کی ہے. اور دوسری بڑی وجہ جو ہے وہ یہ ہے، اپنی جوانی میں تو وہ اس لیے جیلوں میں گئے کہ انہوں نے اپنے دور کے ڈکٹیٹرز کے خلاف آواز اٹھائی، لیکن آج وہ اس لیے جیل کی سلاخوں کے پیچھے ہے کہ ان کی بیٹی آواز اٹھا رہی ہے. اور یہ ان کا میرے والد صاحب کو جیل کی سلاخوں کے پیچھے ڈالنا جو ہے تو وہ شو کرتا ہے کہ ہم آج تک پاکستان بطور ریاست جو ہے تو یہ ایک فیوڈل ریاست ہے. یہاں پر آج بھی کلیکٹیو پنشمنٹس استعمال کی جاتی ہیں ان لوگوں کے خلاف جو کہ حق کی آواز بلند کرتے ہیں. میں سمجھتی ہوں کہ بہت ضروری ہے کہ اس وقت ہم اکراس دا کنٹری اور اکراس دا گلوب ایک سولیڈیرٹی ہونی چاہیے. جو پرسیکیوشن جاری ہے اس کے خلاف اور اس طرح کی پرسیکیوشنز کا ختم ہونا ضروری ہے، صرف میرے خلاف ہی نہیں بلکہ ہر وہ جلا وطن جو پاکستان سے باہر ہے اور ان کے خاندانوں کو ہراساں کر کے ان کی آواز کو خاموش کیا جا رہا ہے. اور آج جبکہ میں آن لائن ہوں اور اپنے باقی پاکستان اور دنیا بھر سے انسانی حقوق کے ایکٹیوسٹس کے ساتھ میں یاد دلانا چاہوں گی کہ جس طرح میں ایک بیٹی ہونے کے ناطے آج سراپا احتجاج ہوں اپنے والد کے لیے، تو اسی طرح پاکستان کی ایک اور بیٹی تالیہ خٹک جو ہے وہ اپنے والد ادریس خٹک کے لیے سراپا احتجاج ہے، جن کو ایک شہری ہونے کے باوجود ملٹری کورٹس میں ان کا کورٹ مارشل کیا جا رہا ہے. تو میں سمجھتی ہوں کہ پاکستان کو اپنی بیٹیوں کو اس طرح ہراساں کرنا چھوڑنا چاہیے اور ہر بیٹی کو یہ حق دینا چاہیے کہ وہ اپنے والدین کے ساتھ زندگی گزار سکے. میں سب سے پہلے چاہوں گی شروع کرنے سے کہ ہمارے ساتھ وی ہیو ایمان مزاری who is the founding partner of MH Advocates and Legal Consultant. She is an international law researcher. She writes and she speaks extensively on human rights issue. So I would like to invite Iman Mazari to start.
Thank you so much, Kudalai. Today marks 1 month since Professor Ismail's unlawful detention on false and frivolous charges. At the very outset, it is pertinent to clarify that Professor Ismail's only crime was giving his daughter the space and freedom to be her own person. What is being done to him is cruel, illegal, and unconstitutional, and it also merits mention that this didn't just start last month. This has been ongoing since at least July 2019 with systematic arrests, intimidation, and raids. The UN special procedures have already communicated to Pakistan previously their concern over Professor Ismail's health in detention, owing to the fact that he requires regular medical attention. Let us make no mistake, what is being done to Professor Ismail was meant to be done to Gulalai. She just happened to get away. And because she got away, the state is punishing her father. They already couldn't digest a young woman speaking truth to power being supported by her family. Second, it is truly unfortunate that we have come to this stage where terrorism and sedition laws are so routinely misused against human rights activists, human rights defenders, and journalists that the law itself has become a joke. The tactics used against Gulalai and her family are a classic textbook example of the ISI and the Pakistan Army blackmailing and torturing families to crush dissent. Third, that those attempting to crush dissent should perhaps take a step back and see the damage that is being done to the rule of law, to all state institutions, and the weakening of the integrity and unity of the Federation. The public has already lost trust in the system, and the state has clearly failed to fulfill its international and domestic human rights obligations. We've seen similar attempts in the past where torturing families has been a tactic the state has used, most recently in the Mir Shakilur Rahman case, which the UN special procedures had also taken up, where he has just recently been released after months of unlawful detention. I have no doubt that Professor Ismail will also eventually be released because there is not a shred of evidence against him. But I want to ask, who will account for what him and his family have gone through because of the fragile egos of a few generals? And in conclusion, a word of advice to those generals, since they're everywhere listening to everything all the time. You will retire one day, so don't accumulate so much bad karma for yourselves. There are always consequences for your actions. So think again, because Pakistan cannot afford to go on like this.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Iman, for your statement. Now I would like to invite Rabia Mahmood. Rabia Mahmood is a researcher, journalist, human rights defenders, and has worked with several organizations, including Amnesty International. Over to you, Rabia Mahmood.
Thank you, Gulale. Today, I'm going to basically talk about how I've seen Professor Ismail's health deteriorating over the course of past 2.5 years since I've known him. I began talking to him when Gulale was first put on exit control list in 2018 for just being critical of state policies and for her defense of the marginalized Pashtuns in Pakistan, a community she also belongs to herself. And then when at first she was arrested, and he was a worried father and a human rights defender himself, because he's very well established in the community, especially in South Asia and Asia, as we've seen through different statements from organizations. And then after Gulale's first exit control list sort of case, then she was arbitrarily detained herself for over a day, and nobody could trace her. Her whereabouts remained unknown. You could also, there could be an interpretation that she was disappeared herself, and her family were excruciatingly worried, and I was talking to Professor Saab. After that, when she got, when she had to go underground because of the severity of the cases against her in May, I realized that her family, despite all the persecution and harassment and demonizing that her family had been seeing for her work, and of course, Professor Saab's continuous support of her daughter, they were not prepared for the kind of harassment which was hurled their way, the kind of persecution they were subjected to. Because the first time, at the time of the first raid at their house in the middle of the night in May or June in 2019, they didn't know that they could use the CCTV footage as evidence. And that was just one of the first incidents of the string of raids that Gulale's immediate family were subjected to, where Professor Ismail lived with Mrs. Uzlifat Ismail and their younger daughter, who again was harassed brutally just because she happened to look like her sister. And even there were social media posts which said that she could be Gulale. And it was also really unfair because she had nothing to do with her sister's activism. She just happened to be her sister. So afterwards, throughout that time, I saw, even before this news story made it to newspapers, and was highlighted on different platforms, we saw that Professor Ismail's health was slowly deteriorating. The mental stress was taking a toll on his physical conditions. It was later reported by different organizations, media outlets, but we saw that happening in person in a way, and we saw that happening really fast. Of course, he remained steadfast and supported his daughter, but they were literally, it was like they were subjected to extreme surveillance. There were raids, and of course, on the houses of the extensive family in Peshawar and parts of KP, at her own house in Islamabad, and there was surveillance because there were men who would come in official cars and circulate their house in Islamabad. Eventually, we saw that Professor Saab was also, when he began facing the police harassment and judicial harassment through fabricated cases, once he was outside Peshawar High Court, and he was, he went missing technically because nobody knew where he was. Again, a case which was, it was just an arbitrary process, the way we've seen human rights defenders and their families being harassed for at least the past three and a half years, beginning of 2018. And Professor Saab was also again treated like this, regardless of the fact that he was already facing cases in the court. This time when he was quote unquote disappeared or arbitrarily detained, he was basically picked up for his online expression. This time he was targeted for his own posts on social media. Eventually he was traced, eventually he was produced in court, and then, you know, we managed to, the family and other activists managed to get the bail. But then they came out, and the Mr. and Mrs. Ismail, his wife Gulale's mother, was put on exit control list. They went to get their passports renewed, and they found out through the passport office that they were on an exit control list. There was no document which was sent to them that you're on a no-fly list. They just happened to find out when they went to the passport office, and eventually, of course, then there would be documents sent to them. After an incident would pass, or after a date would pass, they would just get like a notification from the court. So when we say judicial harassment, it's not just through the fact that the charges were always fabricated and the cases were false. It's also through this like a daily bothering of the family, in addition to surveillance, in addition to targeting, calls, threats, and the series of raids which continued in different forms, right? Because people would show up back in their hometown and in village and question residents about the family. And I still remember in 2020 when I got a call from him, and he could barely speak because he had just tested positive for COVID-19. And this was happening right in the middle of when their financing cases and false charges of terrorism were being slapped on them, and the courts were being reminded that they need to take up this case again. And he was basically trying to figure out how to get a prescription for himself. You know, they had the financial means to take care of themselves, but they were alone. They were harassed, intimidated, living literally in sub jails, completely stressed out, physically burnt out, exhausted, terrorized, demonized, witch hunted by themselves because they only dared to stand up for their daughter, who was critical of state policies and who was exercising her right to peacefully protest. And so, of course, then he went through that time by himself, without his family, without his children, because by now we knew that him and his wife were just alone, and they went through that difficult time by themselves. And now he's been put behind bars. All I want to say is that, like Iman said, that this is a pattern with the state, because Gulala is not the first dissident or rights defender whose family has been persecuted in this way. We know of another dissident whose family were targeted and subject to so much severe surveillance. And Human Rights Commission of Pakistan put this on record, Ahmed Waqas Guraya, a blogger who was disappeared back in the day, that his parents had to go into exile and actually seek asylum in Europe because of what was happening to them. They also had severe health problems because of the kind of harassment they were facing here. And of course, we know what happens to the other people, like Talia has been mentioned. The families of the disappeared in Pakistan do face harassment. They are subject to surveillance when they stand up and when they follow the cases of their missing loved ones in courts. And especially it happens to high profile cases where the missing people are either political dissidents or rights defenders or journalists. So the targeting is systemic, it looks like there's not going to be an end to this, because it's Professor Ismail today, it's going to be another man or another mother or another sister or brother tomorrow, because this is a blueprint that the state now follows when it comes to targeting rights defenders or women rights defenders and their families. And because there is zero tolerance for any kind of peaceful dissent in Pakistan, I just hope that my big worry is that Professor Ismail and his wife, they remain okay, because their health is a big concern. Yes, their liberties as well, and all kinds of rights, but the way they're being very harshly treated, and because of their age, there is likelihood that there are no guarantees that they would remain okay and healthy. I hope they do. I don't want to end this on a very morbid and sad note, but it's just that I'm truly really worried about their health. Yes, thank you.
Thank you so much, Rabia. Thank you so much, Rabia, for your remarks. And for summing up what has been happening with our family for the past 2 years. Now I would like to invite Parvez Hudbai Sahab. He's a physicist, he's a prominent activist, he writes extensively about the promotion of freedom of speech, secularism, scientific temper, and education in Pakistan. He has previously taught at Quaid-e-Azam University, Islamabad, and he's the author of the book, Islam and Science, Religious Orthodoxy at the Battle of Rationality. He is a hero for many progressive young people of Pakistan. Parvez Hudbai Sahab. Please unmute yourself. Parvez bhai, please अपने आप को unmute करें.
Right. Can I be heard now?
जी बिल्कुल, आपकी आवाज अभी आ रही है.
Thank you. What has happened to you, Gulalai, and to your family is absolutely unconscionable and unacceptable to any civilized society. What has happened to Idris Khatak and to so many people is appalling. It's appalling beyond words. All this is being perpetrated by an army which thinks that it alone has sanction to guard this country. But it's not guarding this country. It's guarding merely its own interests, its properties, its businesses. We, as the citizens of Pakistan, and by the way, I'm speaking from Islamabad, we, as the citizens of Pakistan, demand that the army goes back to its barracks and do what it is paid to do, which is look after the external security of this country, that it cease interfering in the daily lives of citizens, it cease disappearing peoples, particularly from those in Balochistan, for those human rights defenders who stand up and speak bravely for the oppressed peoples in this country. There are only a few places in the world left which are under the boot of the army in this horrible, brutal way. We are now becoming, or have in fact surpassed, what has happened in Myanmar, Burma. We are becoming like one of the Latin American states of 30 years ago, where there were generals like Pinochet who crushed opposition. We are now following their footsteps. And all this is being done with a civilian government apparently up front, but which has been propped up by them and which lacks the legitimacy now. So we demand, as citizens of Pakistan, that the army goes back and does what it is supposed to do. So my deepest concerns to you, Gulalai, you should not be in exile. You should be here working for the good of our people. And I know that you would not have left, but for the fact that you had to. I can only wish the very best for your father, for your family, for the family of Idris Khatak and for Idris Khatak himself. And if there's anything that I can do in terms of physical assistance, please do let me know, although I doubt it, because we are not people of means. Means, I mean, in the sense of being able to go to these pharaohs and tell them that, for heaven's sakes, don't destroy this country. And this country is not yours. This country is ours. Damn you, go back to where you belong.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Parvez Hudbai Sahab. Exactly. I think the army needs to go back to barrack, and I need to come back to Pakistan, and everyone in exile needs to come back to Pakistan. And it will be possible only if the army goes back to their barracks and stop persecuting us. Now, I would like to invite David Kay. He's the former UN Special Rapporteur on the promotion and protection of the right of freedom of opinion and expression. Mr. Kay is a clinical professor of law at the University of California, and he's also an activist writing extensively on the freedom of speech. Over to you, David Kay.
Gulalai, thank you so much for inviting me to join you. And just to say a couple of brief words here, I'm really honored to be a part of this protest and this public gathering, particularly to follow such great speakers and to be on this Zoom call with Hina Jalani, who's really one of my heroes in the international human rights law community. I only want to say one word really, and that is, it was just a little bit over 10 years ago that Pakistan ratified the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights. And Iman put Pakistan's obligations very clearly. Pakistan has obligations to protect and to promote everyone's right to freedom of expression and freedom of opinion. Freedom of expression, which is written so broadly, everyone's right to seek, receive, and impart information and ideas of all kinds, regardless of frontiers and through any media. Everyone has a right to peaceful assembly and to public protest. And these are exactly the rights, Gulalai, that you and your family and others on this call have exercised for so many years. And yet repeatedly, we see the government of Pakistan clamp down on expression, and not just in the very forceful ways that the professor just indicated a moment ago, in the redefinition of expression and journalism as terrorism, through broad laws of terrorism, through surveillance that seeks to silence those and intimidate those not to participate in public life, the abuse of government discretion, the restriction of civic space and public debate, which are at the heart of the human rights obligations of the government of Pakistan. So I am only here to express my solidarity with you, Gulalai, with your family, with your father, and with everybody in Pakistan who is engaging in a claim, not for something extraordinary, but just for a claim for the recognition, the protection, and the promotion that everyone in Pakistan enjoys under the obligations of Pakistan itself. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, David Kay, for your presence today here and for giving your statement. Now we have very respected Hina Jalani Saiba with us, and though I would have really wished for her to stay with us throughout the event and to have her concluding remarks, but however I invited her on the very last minute, and it was very gracious of her to change her routine for today and commit us and came here. So thank you so much, Hina Jalani Saiba. She's I think everyone knows her. She's a very well-known lawyer and a human rights activist in Pakistan. Along with her sister Asma Jahangir, she co-founded Pakistan's first all-female legal practice in 1980. She's also one of the founders of Human Rights Commission of Pakistan and Women's Action Forum. These two organizations and movements have been at the forefront of human rights movement of Pakistan for past 4 decades. She is so Ms. Hina Jalani was also appointed as UN International to the UN International Fact-Finding Mission on Darfur. She's also a member of the eminent jurist panel on terrorism, counterterrorism, and human rights, and she's our hero. So Hina Jalani Saiba, over to you. Please unmute yourself.
Thank you so much. You don't really have to thank me. I think we over here, everyone who is present to support you and to participate in your protest or the protest that we are all making today, we are here because of our commitment. And we do believe that the difficult times that everyone who has spoken about not just your plight, but the plight of human rights defenders, the democracy activists, and those who speak about the rule of law in this country and elsewhere globally. I'm not saying Pakistan is the only country where we have this problem. But let me start with saying that I don't know your father, Gulalai, but I know his daughter. And I also know and acknowledge that it is what your bravery and your work that has probably put him in a situation which he may not have expected when you started your struggle. We know that in this country, which is a highly militarized and securitized state, there are false sensitivities created deliberately in order to silence people and to make sure that nobody uses their freedom of expression to expose what the state is doing to its own people, and how the state is violating every guarantee that the Constitution of Pakistan gives for fundamental freedoms and human rights. I don't think that it is therefore in any way surprising that today I see so many of my peers standing with you and behind you. I don't speak here as the chairperson of the Human Rights Commission of Pakistan. I speak as a human rights defender myself, who has had 40 years of testing this state's commitment, its ability, its even its intention to support human rights and the constitution of this country. They have blatantly violated this time and again. And this has been done not just during this particular government, and I think Pervez has very correctly said that it may be worse now, but the only constant factor which makes it so difficult for us to say that the state was ever better than it is today, that continuing factor is the military in this country. And not just the military, but the security apparatus. That the security community in this country is the biggest threat to the promotion and protection of human rights and the work that human rights defenders can carry out. I think from what I've seen after following your case and the reasons why you have been so targeted, is that this state, the deep state in particular, cares more about its image than the realities on the grounds that people like you are speaking about and want to change. They don't care about those realities. They don't care about their obligation to change those realities. And that's why people like you are irksome, because their image is in any way tarnished. They don't care that people in this country are suffering. They don't care that people in Balochistan, in Sindh, and everywhere else in Pakistan are being subjected to enforced disappearances. People are being subjected to arbitrary detentions. People are being subjected to refusal and denial of every fundamental right that is theirs because the Constitution guarantees it. I'm also very conscious that people like you who are now in exile are a part of this human rights community. And when they target people like you, and when they make it difficult for you to survive in this country, and you have to flee the country, this depletes the human rights community in our country. And therefore, your absence from Pakistan is not just your problem. It's the problem of the human rights community in this country. And that's why we are there with you. We support you. We will always support you. I have said that, we have this, this military that we have to deal with. It's been difficult. We've been doing it for years and years. My own life, in my own life, problems started when I was a child, because my father was in the opposition and opposing the military regime way back during Ayub Khan's time in the early 60s. So I know what it is to struggle and to not be able to achieve what we want to achieve. Nevertheless, let us also not forget that there is a strong and vibrant civil society in this country. We have not just people who have experience and have had 40 years of how to learn how to fight with them. And let me tell you that we have fought. And it's not that we haven't achieved anything. We may not have had big successes, but we certainly do make a dent. So we have people who've done that for a long time, but we also have people, and we have Amar Jan sitting here, who are our hope for the future. This is the generation, you know, in Myanmar, I was so encouraged by a slogan that these young people were carrying during the protests, the recent protests, saying to the military, you have messed with the wrong generation. Amar, you need to say that to them now. And that I think is a message, that not just the military, and let us not, let the political element and the political leadership in this country off the hook. They are there to speak for us. And if they do not speak, then they are the cowards that we need to call out as well. So these are some of the things that I wanted to say. And to say in the end, as a human rights defender, I cannot and will not go into depression or in any way feel any kind of frustration or descend into cynicism. I know my job, as you all do. For me, my struggle is important. Successes are a bonus. Thank you.
बहुत शुक्रिया. थैंक यू सो मच नजलानी साहिबा इतने मजबूत अल्फाज बोलने के लिए. और ये जो लड़ाई है ये नर्व्स की लड़ाई है. हम तोड़ना चाहते हैं, हमें तोड़ना चाहते हैं, and we refuse to break down. We refuse to be silenced. And the people, the faces who have joined me together, it is a testimony to the power of the people of Pakistan, to the power of the human rights community of Pakistan, that we stand together against the shrinking spaces for dissent, against the shrinking spaces for civil societies in Pakistan. We will not let Pakistan be taken over by the military establishment. This country will be the country of the people of Pakistan. So thank you for your very powerful words today. Now I would like to invite Ambassador Hussain Haqqani Saab. He is currently Director South Asia at the Hudson Institute. He's an academic politician and he's a human rights defender. He's co-founder of the Saath Forum. He's author of many books, including Reimagining Pakistan and Magnificent Delusions and Pakistan Between Mosque and Military. Hussain Haqqani Saab, Ambassador Hussain Haqqani Saab, over to you.
Thank you very much, Gulalai, and thank you all to all the speakers and participants. I'm coming after a string of speakers who have actually made the case that I would have made as well. So I would just say that I endorse everything that Iman, Zainab, Mazari Hazir, Rabia Mahmood, Parvez Hudboy, David K. and Hina Jilani said. And my contribution to the conversation will take off from what Hina Jilani said about the Pakistani ruling class and the establishment, always expressing concern about Pakistan's image. Pakistan's image is not going to be served by letting terrorists go free and making dissidents into terrorists. Pakistan has been doing that for 4 decades. It was 1992 that Pakistan was first told by the international community that it was supporting terrorism and it should refrain. We are in 2021. So in all these years, Pakistan's rulers have always promised that they will bring change. And how will anybody trust their word if that change does not manifest itself? and all they care about is image. So when the international community says that religious minorities are under threat, that you need to change your blasphemy laws, they do not change the blasphemy laws. They do not change the processes under which a lot of Christians, Ahmadis, Hindus, Muslims with a different interpretation of Islam than the orthodox elements, that they are persecuted. They do not change the persecution. What they do is they settle one case through the Supreme Court and get Asia Bibi out of the country so that they can say, we have taken off the immediate pressure point. And I'm quite certain that because of the pressure that all of us are mounting, inshallah, Professor Ismail will be free. I am quite certain. I am quite hopeful that he will also be able to join you, Gulalai, in exile. But that is not the solution. That is the solution of the problem of the deprivation of Professor Ismail's human rights, but it is not the solution of Pakistan's human rights problem. Pakistan's human rights problem remains the same. As I was getting ready to speak today, it just occurred to me that I was a child when the great poet Faiz Ahmad Faiz, who was in prison at that time, said, "Sitam ki rasmein bahut thi lekin न थी तेरी अंजुमन से पहले, सजा खताए नजर से पहले, अताब जुर्मे सुखन से पहले." That was when I was a child, and now, of course, I am getting to be an old man. And yet, the circumstances haven't changed. The victims change, the targets change, the individuals who are on the top list of terrorists and seditionists and anti-national and Indian agents and American agents and Jewish agents, that list changes a little bit. Hina Jilani can be on the top of it 1 year and maybe moved a little bit because somebody else goes up on the list. Parvez Hudboy has remained on the list for a long time. I have been on the list for a few years now. But the list changes of the individuals, the concepts do not change. The idea does not change. And I think what we have to continue the struggle for is a new idea of Pakistan. A Pakistan that actually prioritizes human rights, that prioritizes the rights of its people, that just implements its constitution instead of extra constitutional arrangements that continue to take place. There are Senate elections taking place in Pakistan, and we have had a silly debate about whether people in that Senate election should vote by secret ballot, as if that is something that in 2021 needs to be debated and discussed. We are debating the question of whether a person like Professor Ismail is entitled to bail. Bail is a right. Bail is not a privilege, but in Pakistan, it has been made into a privilege. People get bail only when the powers that we feel that they will be less of a threat or that they can be kept in check. When a person is accused of something, they have the right to bail immediately. And after that, that accusation needs to be dealt with. But in Pakistan, there are people who have been held in prison for year after year, for tens of years, only on allegations and accusations without trial. And even if there is a trial, we all know how accountability courts and anti-terrorism courts, these special courts are created and how people are appointed to be their judges and with what criteria. And lastly, the superior judiciary, the great Asma Jahangir, who I had the honor of having represent me in one of those many, shall we say, smokes and mirrors that constitute Pakistan's political history. She used to say that while we continue to go to that judiciary for relief, the fact of the matter is that that judiciary is very much a part and parcel of Pakistan's establishment, the repressive establishment that does not recognize the rights of its own people, but thinks that it grants some concessions to some of them, that the fact that some of you are still in Pakistan and can occasionally speak out is a concession from the establishment to you rather than being recognized as your right. And Professor Ismail, if he gets his bail, they will say that we have done you guys a favor. And what can you do in return for us? That is not what Pakistan or any civilized country ought to be, as Parvez rightly said. I think it is time for Pakistan and Pakistanis to recognize that Pakistan does not face the kinds of external threats that we have been brought up to think about. The real threat to Pakistan comes from within. It comes from internal collapse. It comes from the lack of human rights. It comes from the lack of recognition of the constituting units of Pakistan as equal partners in running that country. It comes from the constant oppression and repression, and it comes from the failing economy that comes as a result of all this repression. Several people have spoken about comparisons between Burma, Myanmar, and Pakistan. Let me just point out that the one big difference is that Myanmar still is a resource-rich country. So the authoritarian dictatorship of the military somehow manages to survive through the economic resources that they pillage from their own people. They keep their people poor, but they keep themselves rich. In our case, even the right of the establishment to live, or the privilege of the establishment to live comfortably, comes from externally obtained resources. And I don't think that that can be sustained when the rest of the world continues to recognize Pakistan as a hotbed for terrorism and as a bad place for human rights. So solidarity with all of you. In the case of Professor Ismail, in the case of Idris Khatak, in the case of all those poor Baloch, Sindhis, Pashtuns, and Saraikis who are being targeted, who have disappeared. Thousands of people disappeared, have been acknowledged in the Supreme Court of Pakistan, and yet that Supreme Court did not have the courage or the guts to demand that they all be released and set free. So those realities are realities that we will continue to fight beyond Professor Ismail's trials and tribulations. But for now, let us just continue to demand that Professor Ismail be given his due rights and that he be set free. Thank you all very much.
बहुत शुक्रिया हुसैन हक्कानी साहब। आपकी और हिना जुलानी साहिबा की बात सुनकर वाकई मुझे एहसास हुआ कि मेरी जदोजहद ये नहीं होनी चाहिए कि मेरे माँ बाप को वहां से निकाला जाए। जदोजहद ये होनी चाहिए कि पाकिस्तान को बनाया जाए, ऐसा बनाया जाए कि मैं वापस आ सकूं और मैं वहां पर अपने मुल्क में अपने वालिदैन के साथ रह सकूं, तो और वहां पर हम सबको अपने ड्यू राइट्स मिले। और उन सब का बहुत शुक्रिया जो कि आज इदरीस खटक साहब का नाम ले रहे हैं, क्योंकि मैं तो फिर भी एक एक्टिविस्ट थी और अपने बाप के लिए बोलती हूँ। इदरीस खटक साहब को जब अगवा किया गया तो उनकी 2 छोटी बेटियां रह गई, और वी आर देयर फैमिली, वी आर हिज फैमिली, वी आर हिज कम्युनिटी हु हैव टू स्टैंड फॉर हिम। सो बहुत शुक्रिया जो आज के दिन इदरीस खटक साहब का भी नाम ले रहे हैं, उनको खास कर याद कर रहे हैं। नाउ आई वुड लाइक टू इनवाइट फरतुल्लाह बाबर साहब। फरतुल्लाह बाबर साहब is a former senator, he's a seasoned politician, and he is a prominent member of Pakistan's People Party. He has always stood with human rights, and his commitment with human rights is so strong that he's running for Senate elections tomorrow, but he is tonight here with us in this online protest. बहुत शुक्रिया फरतुल्लाह बाबर साहब, over to you.
Thank you very much, Guzali, Ismail, and everybody on the panel today. Can you hear me?
जी बिल्कुल, आपकी आवाज आ रही है।
First of all, I would like to express complete solidarity with you, Gulali Ismail, your parents, and all the human rights defenders in Pakistan for the fight that you and the human rights defenders have consistently fought for upholding human rights and rule of law in the country. We deeply admire and appreciate your struggle. I assure you that we stand with you and behind you in this struggle. Today is March 2nd, and 1 month has completed when your father was sent to jail on charges of sedition, of colonial era sedition, and also terrorism charges. It was not that he had committed acts of sedition or terrorism, but your father and your family is being penalized for the values that you and your family stand for. And I say this because the actual terrorists roam free in the country. Like as we have seen, Ehsanullah Ehsan has escaped from high security prison. Maulana Masood Azhar is being protected from UN sanctions, and nobody knows who gave Pakistani national identity card and passport to Mullah Mansoor Akhtar, and nobody till this day knows who sheltered Osama bin Laden in a cantonment in Pakistan. The case of your father came up before the National Assembly Committee on Human Rights a week ago on the February 24th, and I was also a special invitee to that committee. And I was appalled, as were every member of that committee appalled, when certain facts came to surface about the case of Professor Ismail. First thing that came out was that the case was thrown out initially by the trial court. Not only it was thrown out, but the trial court made some very stringent observations against the prosecution and investigation, and it discharged the case. When the case was discharged, the provincial government in KPK went into extra drive, and it appointed new special prosecutors to try the. We asked the gentleman, the police officer, as to when the case was discharged by the court and the special prosecutors were being appointed, was it at your advice? Who had done that? He had no answer. That means the case was given to special prosecutors by some invisible and unknown forces. We were really surprised. The third thing that we noted was that when the new charge sheet was framed, it mentioned that Gulale Ismail was involved in the terrorist attack on church in 2013 and in another terrorist attack in 2015 in Peshawar. Incidentally, those were the years when you were honored with national and international human rights awards. But the prosecution said your family were involved at that time in attacking the church. And we also noted that when the fresh case was made and new sections were added, it was submitted before another judge and not the judge which had discharged the case earlier. And we also found out that the raid conducted on your house, it was conducted illegally because the court permission and the court authority was not available. So this is what we learned on that day. Now, your father, I'm sure, will eventually be released. There is no way that he can be kept in detention. So I want to assure you that the National Assembly Human Rights Committee has taken it up. He will be released. But the question is not the release of one individual. Who will compensate for the years that he has lost, for the years that you have been out of the country and in exile? And more than that, it is not the question of one family or one individual. It is the question of the state and society of Pakistan. And I think that at this platform that while you arrange this get together, we must all raise voice, not only for Gulale Ismail, Professor Ismail, but for all the human rights defenders in Pakistan. If we do not do it, if the people of Pakistan do not do it now, then tomorrow, today it is Gulale Ismail, tomorrow it will be me and somebody else. It will be any other person. Therefore, it is incumbent upon every Pakistani, every person who believes in human rights, that on this day, we should raise our voice forcefully, consistently. And as I said, this is not the case of one individual. This is the case of the society and of the state. And the state, it is a security-driven state. And in a security-driven state, the emphasis is not on the welfare and on the rights of the people. The emphasis is on what the establishment thinks is the security of Pakistan. On this day, I would urge everyone to fight and to struggle that the security-driven state is transformed into a welfare and rights-driven state. The second thing that I want to point out is that we are having a hybrid regime in Pakistan. Somebody appearing to be sitting on the driving wheel is not the actual driver. The actual driver is sitting on the rear seat, who is not responsible if the car meets an accident, but who controls all the vital levers of the vehicle, like the brake, the clutch, and the accelerator. And if an accident takes place, the man sitting on the wheel, apparently sitting on the wheel, will be held accountable and is held accountable, but the actual people who control the statecraft are not held accountable. This kind of state model in which the steering seems to be in the control of one person, but the actual drivers are somebody else, is such a vehicle is fated to meet a disastrous accident. Let us on this day resolve that we must try to end this hybrid regime, to end this backseat driving phenomena if Pakistan really is to survive and prosper. I want to thank you, Ismail. Once again, I express my solidarity with you and your family and assure you that sooner or later, your father will be released, justice will be done, but the issue is much larger than you alone and your family. The issue is that of the defense of the human rights, civil liberties, rule of law in Pakistan, and let us rededicate ourselves to these values. Thank you very much.
بہت شکریہ فرات اللہ بابر صاحب. بالکل یہ لڑائی صرف میری یا میرے والد کی نہیں ہے، یہ پاکستان میں انسانی حقوق کی، جمہوریت کی اور آئین کی لڑائی ہے. میں تو صرف ایک سمبولک کیس بنائی گئی ہوں، یہ ہم سب کی اس ملک کی جدوجہد ہے. ناؤ آئی ووڈ لائک ٹو اینڈ بیسٹ آف لک فار یور سینٹ الیکشن. آئی ہوپ کہ ہم آپ کو سینٹ میں دیکھیں جہاں سے آپ ہمارے انسانی حقوق کی آواز بلند کر سکیں. ناؤ آئی ووڈ لائک ٹو انوائٹ جبران ناصر. Jibran Nasir is a lawyer. He's a trustee at the Ilaj Trust. He's a lead campaigner at the Never Forget PK. ہم سب جانتے ہیں کہ مذہبی انتہا پسندی کے خلاف ان کی ایک لمبی جدوجہد رہی ہے. He's also a lead campaigner at the case of Kashmir. Across the region انسانی حقوق کے لیے آواز اٹھاتے ہیں. جبران ناصر.
السلام علیکم جی، بہت شکریہ مجھے مدعو کرنے کے لیے سیشن میں. میرے لیے خوش ہے کہ اس وقت پاکستان سے تعلق شاید میری اتنی عمر نے ان کو بہتر بات ہوئی ایسا بنانے کے لیے کہ ہر پاکستانی خوشی سے بغیر کسی خوف کے یہاں زندگی گزار سکے اور کسی کو بھی جلا وطنی جو ہے وہ کاٹنی نہ پڑے، جیسے گلالا اس وقت آپ اس مرحلے سے گزر رہی ہیں. اس میں تو کوئی شک نہیں کہ پاکستان کی تاریخ اس حوالے سے سول رائٹس اور سول لبرٹیز کے حوالے سے اور ڈسنٹرز کے حوالے سے کوئی اچھی نہیں رہی. ہم جی ایم سید سے شروع کریں، باچا خان پہ جائیں، باچا خان سے ہم شیخ مجیب پہ جائیں، شیخ مجیب سے ہم عطا اللہ منگل کے اوپر آئیں، یا سردار خیر بخش مری پہ آئیں، یا پھر نواب اکبر بگٹی کے اساسینیشن ہو، ذوالفقار بھٹو کی پھانسی ہو، یا بے نظیر بھٹو کی اساسینیشن ہو. تو پروفائل پاکستان میں میٹر نہیں کرتی، آپ کا سیاسی قد میٹر نہیں کرتا. ایک مستقل ٹگ آف وار ہے بٹوین ڈیموکریٹک اور ان ڈیموکریٹک فورسز، اور وہ کسی بھی حد تک جا سکتے ہیں جب ان کو جانا ہو اپنے مقاصد حاصل کرنے کے لیے، کسی بھی ڈسنٹنگ وائس کو خاموش کرنے کے لیے. جو اس وقت پروفیسر اسماعیل کا کیس ہے، ایسا نہیں کہ یہ پہلا واقعہ ہے کہ جب اس طرح کی کوئی ایف آئی آر یا اس طرح کی کوئی چیز کی گئی ہو. یہاں پہ ہمارے علی جان بھی اس سیشن میں موجود ہیں، ان کے اوپر ڈیٹینشن آرڈرز تھے. مگر جو ایک بہت زیادہ افسوس کی بات ہے بطور معاشرہ، بطور سوسائٹی، بطور ایک ملک ہمارے لیے، کہ ہم نے اب جو ایک انسانی جان کا ضیاع ہوا تھا حیات آباد کے امامیہ مسجد میں 2015 میں اور 2013 میں آل سینٹس چرچ پشاور میں، سینکڑوں کی تعداد کے اندر پاکستان کے کرسچنز، اور ہم کہتے رہے کہ جی یہاں پہ ریلیجس انٹالرنس ہے، طالبان، ایک سیکیورٹی نیریٹو ہم لے کے آتے رہے. اور پھر امامیہ مسجد میں بہت سارے اہل تشیع مسلمان اور جو ہمارا سیکٹیرین وائلنس کو لے کے نیریٹو ہے کہ ہم اس پہ الزام دیتے رہے ہیں، دوسرے ملک کے کرداروں کو، اسرائیل تک کو پتہ نہیں کہاں کہاں الزام لگاتے رہے ہیں. اور ہم جو ضرب عضب کے پیچھے ہم نے ایک نیریٹو بنایا، رد الفساد کے پیچھے ایک نیریٹو بنایا، اور یہ باتیں کی کہ اب ہم ان کل قدم جماعتوں کو پکڑیں گے، ان کا تعاقب کریں گے، ان کو روکیں گے. ان ثانیہ کے الزامات جو ہے وہ لگا دینا پروفیسر اسماعیل کے اوپر. یعنی کہ یہ ریاست تیار ہے آل سینٹس چرچ میں شہید ہونے والے سینکڑوں کرسچنز اور امامیہ مسجد کے اندر شہید ہونے والے سینکڑوں شیعہ مسلمانوں کے قتل کی انویسٹیگیشن کو جیپڈائز کرنے کے لیے. یہ ریاست پوری طریقے سے تیار ہے کہ ان کو اس وقت جو وعدے وعید کیے گئے ان سینکڑوں لوگوں کو جو پشاور کے رہائشی ہیں کہ ہم آپ کو انصاف دیں گے اور آپ کے ساتھ کھڑے ہیں, یہ جھوٹا تھا. اور ان تمام کی قربانیوں کو, ان تمام کی زبردستی کی لی بھی شہادتوں کو, چونکہ کوئی بھی چرچ یا مسجد جو ہے وہ مرنے نہیں جاتا, عبادت کرنے نہیں جاتا ہے, اس کو ایک مذاق بنا دیا گیا کہ their sacrifice or their loss of life has been reduced to a mere prop, into a petty game played by our state for trying to suppress voices of dissent, trying to suppress voices which demand accountability, trying to suppress voices which dare to challenge those in power and demand rule of law. کہ اب ہم کل کو پاکستان میں جو اور بڑے واقعے ہوئے ہیں, میرے لیے اب کوئی بعید کی بات نہیں کہ اس سیشن میں موجود کسی ایکٹیوسٹ کے اوپر کل پرچہ کٹ رہا ہو کہ اے پی ایس کے بچے جو مارے گئے تھے اس میں آپ نے فیسیلیٹیشن کی تھی. یعنی کہ جن کازز کے لیے ہم لوگ پریس کلبس کے آگے کھڑے ہوتے رہے ہیں, جن کازز کے لیے طالبان کی تھریٹس فیس کرتے رہے ہیں, جن کازز کے لیے ہم سیکٹیرین آؤٹ فٹس کی تھریٹ فیس کرتے رہے ہیں, ہماری جانوں کو خطرہ رہا ہے, انہی کازز کے اندر, انہی کیسز کے اندر اب ہمیں ان کا ایک طریقے سے ایسوسیٹ ابیٹر ڈکلیئر کیا جا رہا ہے. اس سے زیادہ کوئی میرے خیال میں بھدا مذاق نہیں ہو سکتا. تو صرف یہ نہیں کہ اب ان لوگوں کو جن سے شکایت تھی, بلکہ وہ لوگ جو معصوم پاکستان میں مارے گئے ان کی بھی جانوں کے ساتھ ایک مذاق بنایا گیا. اور ریاست اپنی پرائورٹیز بہت کلیئرلی بتا رہی ہے. اور اس میں ہمیں یہ دیکھنا ہوگا کہ یہاں پہ جب پرائمریلی آپ کا مقصد ہے رول کرنا, اور رول کرنے کے لیے اگر آپ کو لگتا ہے کہ طاقت ایک ذریعہ ہے اور وہ طاقت ہم فورس کے ذریعے لے سکتے ہیں, اور جہاں پہ فورس کم پڑتی ہے وہاں پیسے کے لیے ہم دے سکتے ہیں, جیسے کہ سینٹ الیکشن میں نظر آ رہا ہے, تو پھر کیوں وہ قدر کریں انسانی رائے کی, کیوں وہ قدر کریں عوام الناس کی, کیوں وہ قدر کریں کہ پبلک پرسپشن اور پبلک نیریٹو کیا ہے, when it can be bought, when it can be suppressed, when it can be manipulated as per their whims and wishes. مگر چونکہ وہ یہ کر پا رہے ہیں اور کر رہے ہیں, اس کا یہ مطلب نہیں ہے کہ ہم اپنی جدوجہد چھوڑ دیں یا اپنی جدوجہد روک دیں. مجھے خوشی اس بات کی ہے کہ جہاں پہ یہ شکایت ہوتی ہے کہ پاکستان میں سینسرشپ بہت زیادہ ہو گئی ہے, وہاں پہ ہمیں اس بات کی بھی خوشی ہونی چاہیے کہ اس کا مطلب ہے کہ اور زیادہ پاکستانی اب بولنا شروع ہو گئے ہیں, تبھی سینسرشپ زیادہ بڑھ گئی ہے. ہر عمر کا پاکستانی بول رہا ہے, ہر علاقے کا پاکستانی بول رہا ہے, ہر زبان کا پاکستانی بول رہا ہے. وہ یہی بول رہا ہے کہ جس آئین کے تحت ہم تمام قید ہیں, جس آئین کے تحت ہم پاکستان کے شہری کہلاتے ہیں, اور جس آئین کے تحت آپ ایک پرائیویٹ ملیشیا نہیں, آپ پاکستان کی آرمی کہلاتے ہیں, آپ جو فیصلہ سنا رہے ہیں وہ دیوانے نہیں بلکہ محترم ججز کہلاتے ہیں, آپ جو ہم پہ حکومت کر رہے ہیں وہ کوئی اپریسر نہیں, وہ ایگزیکٹو کہلاتے ہیں. اس آئین کی اگر عزت نہیں ہے اور اس آئین کی روح سے اگر پاکستانی عوام کی, پاکستانی شہری کی عزت نہیں ہے, تو یہ نظام آگے مستقل چلتا نظر نہیں آ رہا. تو اس امید کے ساتھ کہ پروفیسر اسماعیل کے اوپر لگے الزام, آپ کی والدہ پہ لگے الزام ختم ہو, اس امید کے ساتھ کہ ادریس خٹک پہ لگے جو مقدمات ہیں وہ ختم ہوں, اس امید کے ساتھ کہ نہ صرف یہ مقدمات ختم ہوں بلکہ اس ریاست کے اندر اتنی غیرت اور اتنا ظرف آئے کہ وہ اپنے ان تمام شہریوں سے معافی مانگے, ان کو ڈیفیم کرنے کے لیے, ان کو ٹراما سے گزارنے کے لیے, ان کو ہراساں کرنے کے لیے, ان کو اپنے خاندانوں کو نیوکلیر سسٹم توڑنے کے لیے, ان کو اپنا ملک چھوڑنے پہ مجبور کرنے کے لیے معافی مانگے. بیکاز وہی جو بات ہے جو پی ٹی ایم کا بھی مطالبہ رہا ہے, جس کو ہم بار بار دہراتے ہیں, ٹروتھ اینڈ ریکنسیلیشن. جب تک ہم اس عمل سے نہیں گزریں گے, میرے خیال میں تو میں نہیں دیکھ رہا کہ پاکستان کے اندر حقیقی معنوں پہ کوئی جمہوریت کا سفر شروع ہو سکتا ہے. اور جب تک یہ اسکیلیٹنز ان دی کلوزٹ کو ایڈریس نہیں کیا جائے گا, تب تک میں نہیں دیکھ رہا کہ کوئی بہتری آ سکتی ہے. اس دعا کے ساتھ کہ ہم اس سفر کے اندر جو ہے استقامت سے رہیں, اور جس طریقے سے آج کل بڑی بڑی مین اسٹریم پولیٹیکل پارٹیز کے بڑے بڑے طاقتور ایم پی اے جو ہیں وہ جو جس طرح سے اٹھتے گرتے پڑھتے نظر آ رہے ہیں, میں قربان جو اپنے ملک کے ایکٹیوسٹس کو جو بغیر کسی پولیٹیکل سپورٹ کے اور پیٹرنیج کے اتنی ساری تھریٹس کے باوجود جو ہیں وہ قائم اور دائم استقامت کے ساتھ کھڑے رہتے ہیں. اور میرے خیال میں یہ رول ماڈلز ہیں آنے والی جنریشن کے لیے, بجائے اس کے جو انفارچونیٹلی اس وقت ایوان میں بیٹھے ہوئے. میں اور مزید آپ کا وقت نہیں لوں گا, دوبارہ شکریہ ادا کروں گا اس میں مدعو کرنے کے لیے, اور امید کرتا ہوں کہ پروفیسر اسماعیل جو ہیں ان کے تمام الزام جلدی ختم ہو اور ان کو باعزت بری کیا جائے.
बहुत शुक्रिया Jibran Nasir Sahab. Now I would like to invite Juliet Roslow. She's the South Asia Program Officer at FIDH, International Federation for Human Rights. FIDH has always stood strong against persecution of human rights activists in Pakistan. Juliet Roslow.
Thank you so much, and many thanks for inviting FIDH to participate in this very important event. Through the Observatory for the Protection of Human Rights Defenders, which is a partnership of FIDH and the World Organization Against Torture, the OMCT, we've expressed our concern in multiple urgent appeals over the past several years over the arbitrary arrest of human rights defenders in Pakistan, including Professor Ismail, which in our opinion only seems to be aimed at punishing him for him and his family's legitimate human rights activities. We have called on and continue to call on the Pakistani authorities to immediately and unconditionally release him and to put an end to all acts of harassment, including at the judicial level against him and the rest of his family. Unfortunately, though, the judicial harassment against the Ismail family is only part of a broader pattern of harassment of civil society and human rights activists in Pakistan. Much like in other parts of South Asia, the Pakistani government has taken steps in recent years to limit the space for civil society, using the authorities to harass and constrain human rights organizations and activists and journalists. The instrumentalization of legislation such as the Electronic Crimes Act or the Anti-Terrorism Act, as has been done in Professor Ismail's case, is just one piece of the puzzle. Local NGOs are being faced with increasingly onerous registration requirements or arbitrarily being shut down. International organizations are being banned from operating in Pakistan, and self-censorship is on the rise, to name just a few restrictions. To that end, we urge the Pakistani authorities to engage in real reforms to reverse this trend and to allow civil society to flourish in Pakistan in light with its international legal obligations. And with that, I'd like to end just to say that FIDH continues to support human rights defenders in Pakistan, and we will continue to do that. And we're happy to have had this opportunity to show our solidarity with the movement. Thank you again.
Thank you, Juliet Roslow, for your solidarity, and thank you to FIDH. Now I would like to call Mariana Kaczarau. She's founder and chair of Raw in War, which is Reach All Women in War. She is the lead campaigner at and founder at Refuse to be Silent. And she awards every year, she awards Anna Politkovskaya Award to woman human rights defender. One of the award winner was Malala Yousafzai, and I was also one of the award winner. Mariana.
Thank you, Gulali. I just want to start by saying how privileged I feel to be invited to take part in this protest and to be among such heroes of mine, I would say, like David Kaye, Hina Jelani and her sister Asma Yakangir have been my heroes, and I've been learning from them to become a human rights defender when I was at Amnesty International and then at the UN. I met Gulalai in 2017 when Reach All Women in War awarded her with the Anna Politkovskaya Award. Anna was my friend. She was killed. She was a Russian journalist who was writing about the torture and atrocities against civilians in the war in Chechnya. And she was killed in Moscow to silence her critical reporting. So every year since 2007, we've been presenting this award to exceptional women, girls as well. Malala was still under 18 when she received this award. And when I met Gulalai, I was so humbled because there was so much that I, the older sister, the older human rights defender, had to learn from her, had to learn later from Saba, her sister, whom I met during the time of trying to campaign for Gulalai's safety last year. I learned really this incredible hope that Gulalai always carried in the face of grave danger, In 2014, there was already threats against Gululai. There was already threats to her family. Professor Ismail, her father, was in detention. He was arrested several times. He's been persecuted for his human rights work. And as Hina Jelani, I could say, I haven't met your father, Gululai, but I have met you, I have met Saba, and I know that because of Professor Ismail and because of your mother, but especially because of your father, like Malala's father, your generation of women human rights defenders have made us proud, has made us humble around the world, not just in Pakistan. And I'm extremely worried, not only because the persecution against you and your family continues inside Pakistan and what the Pakistani human rights community could do to stand by you, to stand with you and with Professor Ismail, but I'm very worried about the international community and how can we live with ourselves if two young women and their elderly father, university professor, have been persecuted in and out for years in Pakistan only because they have been showing the way to peacemaking, because you and Saba has established this amazing organization. You were only 16, aware girls, to convince young people in the north of Pakistan who have been glorifying maybe joining Taliban or joining some kind of cause for freedom, to convince them that being peacemakers is actually more glamorous and more dignified than joining armed groups. And for this peacemaking, for leading the way, you've been persecuted to the point that last year, for 3 months, really, we've been, apart from campaigning on your behalf, actually, I was praying every day. I was praying to all gods and to fate, to keep you safe, because this time I was very worried that we may not be able to see you again. We went with Saba to see all sorts of governments in New York. We saw all sorts of officials at the UN. Then I continued to Geneva last year, lobbying governments, lobbying the members of the Human Rights Council. We mobilized our winners of the Anna Politkovskaya Award, who are all women like you, putting their life on the line in different countries, in different conflict zones, many of them forgotten, like the security conflict. I would say the north of Pakistan is a hidden conflict for the world. And we mobilized the women members, the women Nobel Peace Prize winners, together with our Anna Politkovskaya winners, to address the world governments on your behalf. However, doesn't matter how much we did. We did also petitions with women human rights defenders from around the world. Again, I think what remains is why the world, while women like you, like human rights defenders like your father, are refusing to be silenced, are continuing to promote peace in dark places, hold the light in dark places, why the international community is still, I would say, turning a blind eye, because it wasn't the governments that actually helped save your life last year. I would say, really, if there is a god or a goddess, it had something to do with that. It had something to do with luck. It wasn't the international community. It wasn't the power of all these international organizations that we have set up to defend whistleblowers, peacemakers, human rights defenders like yourself, to be safe, to be speaking up against atrocities and against injustice. And I think there is something wrong with our setup, or we haven't really managed to mobilize enough voices from the good side, from the good governments, if you want, or from the good side of the equation, to to keep you safe, to keep your family safe. I wanted to finish this by actually reminding everybody what you in 2017 wrote, because we asked each winner of our award to write an imaginary letter to Anna Politkovskaya and tell her about their work, their struggle, their conflict zone. And Gululai wrote, accepting our award. Anna, the world may seem dark with hundreds of conflicts happening all over the world and people like us being persecuted. How heartbreaking it is that people have to choose between their right to speak out and their right to life. No one should be choosing between the two. However, Anna, I want to tell you that if there is darkness, there is hope too. Strong young voices are emerging from the darkest conflict zones. We're not alone. Our voices are becoming the voices of many, and this will change the world. Anna, I pledge to you that we won't leave this earth in this shape. We will make it a better and peaceful place. Soon, the power of love will overcome the love of power. Dear Anna, I refuse to be silenced. Between darkness and hope, I choose hope. We stand with you, Gululai, with Saba, and with Professor Ismail, and we also choose hope in the name of light, in the name of peace, in the name of human rights. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mariana. Today's event is a testimony that I am not alone, we are not alone, and there is a lot of hope. And people like Amara Rijan, Jibran Nasir, and Amar Rashid present here is also a testimony that new, bold, and strong voices are emerging from the darkest parts of the world. And I'm so glad they are here with me today. I feel so strong with young leaders, and the elder generation, both present in this room today. It's truly an intergenerational dialogue today. Now I would like to invite Bridget Moise. She's Executive Director of Peace Direct USA. She has been actively lobbying in the United States for bridging local peace builders with the international policymakers and for amplifying the voices of local peace builders. Bridget.
Thank you so much, Gululai, and I want to echo the sense of honor that I feel to be here and the sense of gratitude and deep support and solidarity to you and your family and to this whole community working for a more just and peaceful world. I'm zooming in from Washington, D.C. and have known Gululai and Saba and their work with the Weir Girls for a number of years through the organization I work with, Peace Direct. And Peace Direct is an international organization that supports local people on the front lines of conflict who are building peace. Weir Girls and Gululai and Saba are some of our longest and dearest partners. And we have been with you through this struggle. And I'm so happy to be here today to say just a few words about why we are here supporting you. So 3 of the many, many reasons, Gululai, that we are here supporting you and your family and calling for the release of your father. First, it is because we are also your family. You know that Peace Direct and all our partners around the world like to talk about our Peace Direct family. And you are such an important part of it, a leader for us, and we are here with you, supporting you. You also know that you and Saba, I like to speak of you as some of my sheroes, because you have taught me so much about what it means to be committed to the work of nonviolence, pluralism, democracy, human rights, and to standing up for the rights of women and girls. And so I have been thinking a lot through this time as you've been sending me updates about your father, and we're hearing about the situation now today, about the story that you and Saba have shared with me when I've said, what inspires you to do this work? What keeps you going, gives you hope, and makes you so courageous and strong? And you would tell me the story of your father when you were young girls after school, making you come home and study the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. And so the influence of your father and his leadership and his support to you, I know you are still feeling it while he is separated from you. And I know that he is so proud and supportive of you, even through this difficult situation. So we're your family too, and we're here for you. Second, I'm here and Peace Direct is here because while this may seem like one case, it is representative of what many have already spoken to, which is a rise in authoritarianism and crackdown on the space for civil society to function globally. And we know that that rise was going on before COVID and that it has gotten worse during this pandemic. And this case is just one that represents many, many families and people all around the world who are suffering in the midst of this crackdown. And civil society, a healthy civil society for people like Gulalai to be able to stand up and raise their voices peacefully for the rights of their people is a fundamental need for a healthy democracy and a safe and secure world. And so standing up now and insisting on the release of your father is something that is not just important as part of your collective global family, but it's important for all of the world. And then finally, just a third reason of the many that we're here is because injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere, as Martin Luther King said. And he went on to say that we are caught in an inescapable network of mutuality, tied in a single garment of destiny. Whatever affects one directly affects all indirectly. I'm here in Washington, DC, and I have been so inspired by your struggle and all that you've been through. When you came to the US, we thought, well, Gulalai, after everything you've been through, maybe it's time for you to be quiet and just rest a little bit. Maybe you should stay safe now after all you've been through. And you said to me, no, more than ever, I must raise my voice because whatever happens to me and my family, this is happening to many, many more people. And that injustice and your voice in ensuring that our mutuality as a human family is recognized and that we all stand in support of one another is vital for me and for our work as peace builders around the world and for our collective destiny together. So thank you so much for the leadership and courage. We are with you here. We stand with you in solidarity with your father, and we're here to do whatever we can to help you. Thank you so much, Gulalai and Saba, and thank you to everyone who's here supporting them and working together for this. It's an honor to be here.
Thank you so much, Bridget, for being with us here today. Now I would like to invite someone I have known for more than 12 years. She is my Shiro, Sila Elworthy. She is a peace builder and the founder of the Oxford Research Group, a non-governmental organization she set up in 1982 to develop effective dialogue between nuclear weapon policymakers worldwide and their critics, for which she was nominated 3 times for the Nobel Peace Prize. She is also the founder of Peace Direct, an organization working on amplifying voices of local peace builders, and she has always stood by me in my work on peace building. Sila Elworthy. Please unmute yourself.
Thank you, Gulalai. You are indeed one of the people that I quote most often in terms of those who set a model for standing up against injustice, for standing up for people who have lost their rights, and for enabling those who want to prevent terrorism and who want to prevent terrible acts of violence. You have not only trained them, but you've also set up organizations to support them. So I greatly venerate that, and also your father and your mother who have supported you so strongly all the way through. Women who have supportive fathers who get behind them, guide them, advise them are very fortunate. And he's fortunate to have you as a daughter. Now, when you asked me to think what I would like to say, I wrote down, if you'll permit me, what I would like to say to the current director of ISI in Pakistan. That is Lieutenant General Faiz Hamid. And I would like to say to him, the work of Gululai Ismail and her organization Aware Girls has been thoroughly investigated by my organization, Peace Direct. And you just heard from Bridget, who runs the office in New York. We scrutinize each organization carefully before offering any support in the form of training, media facilities, and encouragement. And Peace Direct is familiar with Gululai's work to train teams of young people to prevent other young people from joining extremist groups. And they use the tools of listening and dialogue. In doing this, they have reached and dissuaded more than 500 teenagers at risk of becoming extremist. And we at Peace Direct believe that their work will have prevented many deaths and injury to innocent people, deaths through ambush bombings and extrajudicial killing. This work is recognized internationally and gives a favorable impression of Pakistan through the courage and wisdom of those whom Gululai trains in order to prevent armed violence. It is therefore a mistake, a major mistake, to have detained Gululai Ismail's father, Professor Muhammad Ismail, who was arrested on the 2nd of February on charges of sedition and terrorism, to try to punish him for trumped up charges against his daughter. The whole world can see that the very opposite is true, that he supports his daughters to prevent terrorism. Professor Ismail's arrest by persons apparently acting beyond the control of the Prime Minister Imran Khan must immediately be reversed, unless the reputation of Pakistan's security services be further and irreparably damaged in international circles. The Prime Minister it was the Prime Minister who appointed Lieutenant General Hamid and therefore is responsible for these illegal acts. I don't know if that is too strong a message, Gululai, but it is what I feel. And I would take your guidance in whether to make it clearer in the international media or not. Thank you for having me on your broadcast.
Thank you so much, Salal Worthy. I think you have spoken to the very right person, the person who is actually responsible for most of the mess in Pakistan. Thank you for being very honest. Now, I would like to honor Women Action Forum, whose delegation is present here today. We have Sara Zaman, we have Afia Zia, Anis Harun from Women Action Forum with us. And thank you so much, Anis Harun Saiba, for staying with us. I would really like to have you towards the end of the program, so stay with us. Now I would like to invite Marvi Sarmat. Marvi Sarmat is one of the lead feminists in Pakistan, forefront activist of the women rights movement. She's a research scholar at the University of Connecticut, a bold human rights activist. Marvi Sarmat.
Thank you very much, Gululai. I'm so glad to see so many good people from around the world and from Pakistan together on this with you. Let me say upfront, I am with you like so many other people. My solidarity, just to express my solidarity, I'm here. But so many people, so many senior art teachers, they have spoken up, and there's literally nothing left for me to speak, and I will not, I'm not able to add to it in any way. but just to express my my emotions right now, because Professor Saab, your father, is he's a leading light for intellectually for many of us, and we have followed his views, his work throughout these years. When we were growing up, we used to listen to these elders and from the left movement in Pakistan, and he was one of those people who has influenced so many minds. Not only you, Gulalai, he has been instrumental in raising so many of us, our intellectual, we have grown up intellectually, listening to these people. Few of them we have already heard. Faratullah Babar Saab, I can see Frasiab Khatak Saab, I can see Busha Gohar Saiba, Hina Jilani, so many other people, but Professor Ismail is also in that league. And as a teacher, he has actually influenced many, many lives, not just Gulalai and her siblings. Having said that, and just listening to what Sheila was saying, I feel that there is something fundamentally wrong with the understanding with how Pakistan's military establishment understands the world. You see, every good mind I see in Pakistan is either being persecuted or has been persecuted. I can see Amar Ali Jan among the people here right now. I mean, Pervez Hood Bhai Saab has probably left, but he was here. All these good people who are telling good things to the new generation are being persecuted and being discredited by very baseless, propaganda. Their integrity is being, they're trying their best to demolish their integrity. But on the other side, the people who are being promoted by the same forces, they are from the lowest of the lowest cadre in their fields, whether they are journalists, whether they are lawyers or intellectuals, so-called, or teachers. I mean, there's something fundamentally wrong with this attitude, and this is not an attitude that brings a country, that makes a country emerge from ignorance to another level where the world recognizes it, and where the world recognizes it as a serious contributor to the international community and the progress of humanity. And by silencing these voices who are telling you what is wrong and where is wrong, it is like just closing your eyes from the, when you are in a tunnel and there's a light coming, and someone tells you this is not, this is the light coming from a fast approaching train. It's not the light you are seeing, you are thinking it is. And you try to silence those voices. It's just like that too. You are in a tunnel, and the fast approaching train is coming, and the light is there, its headlights. And people like Professor Ismail, Gulalai Ismail, Amar Ali Jan, Gibran Nasir, all of these people, they're telling you, come on, you are set for, your own destruction. And you are telling them that you are committing sedition. You people are out to do propaganda against Pakistan. You are the agents of the West and of India, of Israel, blah, blah, blah. And the common Joe on Pakistan street, I used to think, looking at the social media, I used to think everyone in Pakistan hates me, and I'm the person, the persona non grata in Pakistan, not only by the powers that be, but by everyone. But when I was in Pakistan, when I used to go out on streets, I used to get so much, appreciation and admiration by common people who don't know. I have never seen them, but people listen. People listen to the voices of reason. I'm not saying I'm the voice of reason, but all these people who are on this platform right now, and that is the point where the powers who do not want the people to know the truth are afraid, and that's where they want these voices to be silenced. And Gulalai, thank you very much for being what you are. Thank you, Professor Ismail, for being what you are. Your voice is loud enough to irk them. And that is why they are trying very hard to silence not only you, but I would also like to remember, if you allow me, Idris Khatak Saab and Karima Baloch, Sajid Baloch, so many other people who are unfortunately not with us right now. Fortunately, Idris Khatak and Professor Ismail is still with us, but look at what they are facing, just because, as a consequence of their struggle for bringing better change in Pakistani society. And I agree with other panelists when they said that this is not just the problem of Gulalai Ismail. It is, and it is not just the problem of Pakistan. I think Martin Luther King Jr. has been quoted, an injustice anywhere is injustice everywhere. And this is why, Gulalai, so many people are with you right now, and we must also raise voice for the people who are voiceless. I will take this opportunity to talk about the Baloch missing persons as well. The women, Baloch women, must not be forgotten at this International Women's Day in Pakistan, where during the times of pandemic, they were left alone. They were left high and dry without any support, because their sons, their husbands, their male members, they don't have, most of the households in that area do not have any male member to support their families because they have been picked up by the intelligence agencies illegally. So I think this, whatever happening is with Professor Ismail is just a symptom of very, very serious and very deep problem. And thanks, Gulalai, for bringing us all together so that we could talk. And so many, I'm really grateful to you for having invited me, and I got this opportunity to listen to so many people who I really, really admire otherwise as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Marvi Sarmat, for your statement. Now I would like to invite Anis Haroon. She is civil rights activist, pioneer of the Women Action Forum and the women rights movement in Pakistan. She's among the women who dreamt of a better place for women to live at a time when tyranny was at its peak during the Zia era. Anis Haroon.
Thank you, Gulalai. It's lovely to see you. Can you hear me?
जी जी बिल्कुल आपकी आवाज आ रही है.
And let me tell you that you are a brave girl. I love you. And it's really nice to see you today. I'm representing Women's Action Forum, and you know that WAF has always stood for the right causes, which is human rights, freedom of expression, which is democracy and sovereignty of people, and human rights of the people. And since the day you were incarcerated, WAF took it upon itself to run a campaign for freedom of Gulalai. And I remember that when you were being threatened, when you were in danger, me and some other friends tried our best to give you support for your safety, and that you are able to live independently without any threats from the military government. We all know what is happening in this country. We all know that there is no democracy. We call it hybrid regime, but in fact, this is nothing but martial law, let me tell you. This civilian government is just a facade, and all our rights are being usurped. So there's no question of human rights in this country. What is happening to your father is a clear example. اس ریاست کا اتنا خوف ہے, اتنا ڈر ہے اپنی پوری مائٹ کے باوجود کہ تم باہر ہو, مگر وہ ایک لڑکی سے بھی ڈرتے ہیں. اتنے خوف زدہ ہیں. کیوں ہیں؟ اگر آپ حق میں ہیں تو پھر اتنے ڈر کی کیا ضرورت ہے؟ If there is someone who is anti-state, if there is someone who has committed a crime, why don't you bring that person to the court of law? ہمارا تو ڈیمانڈ یہی رہا ہے نا کہ آپ کورٹ میں لائیں اور ثابت کریں. اگر اس نے کوئی جرم کیا ہے تو آپ اس کو سزا دیں. تو آپ یہ تو نہیں کرتے کیونکہ آپ کو پتا ہے کہ کسی نے کوئی جرم نہیں کیا ہے. اگر کوئی جرم کیا ہے تو وہ یہ جرم ہے کہ آپ کے خلاف اپنی زبان کھولی ہے, آپ کے خلاف اپنے لب کھولے ہیں اور بتایا ہے کہ آپ جو ہے وہ غلط کر رہے ہیں, آپ جو ہے وہ ڈیموکریسی کا خون کر رہے ہیں, آپ جو ہے یہاں کے لوگوں کا اور ہیومن رائٹس کا قتل کر رہے ہیں. کیوں نہیں پکڑا آپ کے قبضے سے؟ آج میرا سوال یہ ہے کہ کیسے اے پی ایس کے اتنے بچوں کا قاتل غائب ہو گیا, چلا گیا؟ احسان اللہ احسان, کہاں تھی آپ کی اتنی مائٹ, کہاں تھی آپ کی اتنی طاقت؟ اس کو تو آپ روک نہیں سکے, اس کو تو آپ پکڑ نہیں سکے, اور آپ غصہ اپنا اتار رہے ہیں گلالائی کے فادر پہ. اس کو آپ نے پکڑ کے بند کر دیا ہے. کیوں نہیں احسان اللہ احسان کو آپ اپنے قابو میں رکھ سکے؟ اس لیے کہ شاید آپ خود اس کو چھوڑنا چاہتے تھے. اس کے پاس آپ کے بہت سارے راز ہوں گے. اور یہاں اسماعیل صاحب جو بے گناہ ہیں, جن کا قصور صرف اتنا ہے کہ وہ ایک بہادر بیٹی کے باپ ہیں, وہ بیٹی جو کہ ہیومن رائٹس کے لیے, انسانیت کے لیے, لڑکیوں کی آزادی کے لیے اپنی آواز بلند کرتی ہے, آپ ان کو آپ نے پکڑ کر 1 مہینے سے اندر بند کر دیا ہے. بٹ لیٹ می ایشور یو گلالائی, وی آر آل ود یو. وی اسٹینڈ ان سالیڈیرٹی ود یو. وی اسٹینڈ ان کمپلیٹ سالیڈیرٹی ود یو. جس وقت بھی, جب بھی ویب سے ہم سے ممکن ہو سکے گا, جو بھی کال ہوگی, جو بھی طریقہ ہوگا, ہم ہمیشہ تیار ہیں کہ ہم آگے آئیں اور تمہیں سپورٹ کریں اور اسماعیل صاحب کو سپورٹ کریں. تھینک یو ویری مچ.
بہت شکریہ انیس ہارون صاحبہ, ہمت دلانے کے لیے اور یہ بتانے کے لیے کہ جو نوجوان انسانی حقوق کے کارکن ہیں, کام کرنے والے ہیں, وہ اکیلے نہیں ہیں. Now I would like to invite Scott Jacobson. He is Vice President of Young Humanist International Canada. He has joined us from Canada.
Hi, former at this time, in terms of not communications officer. It's really privileged and honored to be in the presence of everyone here who I'm, some of whom I'm very well aware of and some less well aware of. But I think, the large narrative in regards to the Ismail family is that this is a family affair that has been years long running, that I've been following as an independent journalist. Fundamentally, what we're seeing are very explicit violations of human rights and the use of illegitimate judicial force to silence individuals who are human rights defenders and activists on the ground. I'm really impressed by individuals who are in Islamabad and Pakistan at large, who are trying and working very hard to make those dents in the repression of human rights. Professor Ismail is just another case, and he's had a number of cases in his own narrative around the violations of his own human rights. And I mean, this is, as many others have noted, quite aptly, one of a number of cases internationally. Yet, as this is largely a family affair for the Ismails, we're just seeing illegitimate harassment that is in no way dignified or justified. What I am very heartened by is just the number of people from the international community coming here today. Is that there's an old maxim, which is Thucydides' maxim, which is the strong do as they please while the weak suffer what they must. And usually that's stipulated in international discourse as a truism. However, I think when it comes to international human rights and international law, when we have individuals coming from the international human rights defender community to actively call on governments to defend the rights of citizens who are trying to fight against terrorism, trying to enact the rights of other people, it's actually a denial of that maxim in particular cases. And I think that's really the core message here in terms of an illegitimate jailing starting February 2nd on trumped up charges, fundamentally. So I think when we're looking at this case, it is merely another facet reflecting a larger prism of just human rights violations of individuals in countries who are in very difficult circumstances, very admirable in my opinion, who are trying to defend human rights, being punished for it when in more proper circumstances they would be praised, awarded, and raised in the public consciousness for the work that they are doing. And so as a stray Canadian, an independent journalist to this particular forum, I would really call on anyone else who is within the international community or within the authorities of Pakistan of conscience to have him released on bail, Professor Ismail released on bail, because I think these are illegitimate charges fundamentally in a violation of human rights, whether it's stipulated internationally or internationally. It's merely trying to enact that which was promised on paper for individuals who are trying to make the country a safer, more peaceful place, of which the Ismail family is one great legacy holder in Pakistan, and a very admirable one of that. Thank you.
Thank you, Scott. Now I would like to invite Fariha Aziz. She is a journalist, she's digital rights activist and co-founder of Bolobhi.
Thank you, Gulalai. It's harrowing to see what Professor Ismail has been subjected to. And what I would like to state here is that, I mean, there's the case of financial sort of terrorism right now, but to go back to earlier cases also, one case after another, he was also persecuted under the Prevention of Electronic Crimes Act, which is also being used against dissidents. Even for like here, so now when the state has been cracking down and people choose to congregate online or speak online, or a lot of the journalists have been pushed out of the mainstream onto social media, this has become a handy tool. And this legal harassment is something, it's unfortunate that we've been reduced to now saying or hearing around us that rather than going missing, it's better if a case is constructed against you. But both Amar Ali Jan and Amar Rashid, they faced cases as well as have other people. That is a completely different kind of persecution and harassment. And that is not easy to deal with as well. It depletes your resources in every manner. Whether it's financial, legal assistance, immediate, denial of bail, as we're seeing with Professor Ismail as well, completely fabricated charges, even when he was booked under the cybercrime law for cyber terrorism and hate speech. When you read the law and you look at the sections, even though this is a bad law that was resisted and it is a very vaguely worded law, even the way that it is framed, it does not allow for those offenses to be made out against him in the manner that they were. But this is the dilemma here, that it is so easy to construct fabricated cases against people. It is so easy to put them through legal and judicial harassment, deny them bail, and harass them at the investigation and pre-trial stage. You know, a lot of people say, well, at least people are not getting convicted, but that's not the point. Process is the punishment that people are being subjected to, including Professor Ismail. And then there are a series of other things that happen. Social isolation, people start distancing themselves. There are financial repercussions, loss of jobs, career, in every possible way right now. Gulalai and her sisters and family abroad, her parents have to face everything alone. They had to, they got COVID because they were being dragged through court cases. Just the dilemma and the everyday thing. Once you're in the headlines or maybe a few hearings, people pay attention. But how many times it is so long-winded, so long drawn out, that are people going to come with you for every single hearing? They're just going to make you, and what happens at the hearings? Nothing substantive. They're going to make you appear in the morning, wait till afternoon, then you get another date. You don't know when it's going to go away. And this also, the mental agony of not knowing when this is going to end and when another case is going to be constructed against you. So the legal harassment that is taking place, so-called as per law, that we see a complete erosion of rights. Supposedly we have fundamental rights and protection against malicious prosecution, coercive action by the state, but we don't see any of that in practice. It's very unfortunate that bail is being denied, that some people have to go up to the Supreme Court, and then it's cost prohibitive. The amount of money, lakhs of rupees, are also being demanded in bail for certain activists. And this collectively, this coercive environment is taking a toll on people. So I'll end here. I really do hope that Professor Ismail, Gulalai and her family see some respite. And Gulalai, we are there in solidarity with you.
Thank you so much, Fariha Aziz. Now I would like to invite Osama Khilji. He also is the co-founder of Bolobi. He's a journalist. He writes for Dawn. And I really wanted to have Fariha and Osama Khilji here today because cybercrime laws are one of the regressive laws that are now extensively used against human rights activists, political activists, and dissidents in Pakistan. So the voices of Fariha Aziz and Osama Khilji are really important for us today. Osama.
Thank you, Gulalai. And just to build on what Fariha said, when the Prevention of Electronic Crimes Act was being promulgated, and there was this huge debate in the process that we were involved in, and many friends here present here were also involved in it. And we always argued that this law is going to be abused, but we were told that this law is actually for the protection of citizens, for the protection of women, for protection against terrorism. But what we're seeing today, that this law is being abused to no end, maliciously, with malicious intent. They're trumped up charges, and it's basically a tool to silence and crush dissent all over the country, no matter what group you belong to. If you are deemed controversial, anything you say on social media will be used against you, and you'll be dragged through the torture of the process, through the FIA, through the courts, through law enforcement, plainclothes, people that show up. And I think that's what this fight is about, because it's just about undermining your basic freedom of expression. Why is Gulalai being persecuted? Because she decided to speak up against militarization, against militancy, and used her voice as her fundamental constitutional right to point out flaws in state policies. But what we're seeing is that anti-terrorism laws and cybercrime laws are being abused to no end, where ridiculous charges, where a family of educators, of activists, and of human rights defenders being accused of a crime of terrorism, that's literally making a joke out of all the victims and survivors of terrorism in this country. And it really shows you where the state's heart is really lying. So if the state is really serious about doing justice to the victims of terrorism and doing justice to the citizens' security in this country, I think this case should be immediately dropped, and Professor Ismail should be freed, as should all the disappeared people, and as should all political prisoners in this country. Because without that, as mentioned earlier, I think it's going to be a very tough situation for Pakistan internationally also. So there's still time for the state to do the right thing, and all of us here would like to urge the state to do the right thing instead of pushing people out of the country. Embrace them as your own citizens and provide them the rights that they're entitled to. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Osama Khilji, for making statement. Now I would like to invite Jana Transtrom. She is the founder and director of Quota Alliance. Quota Alliance is an alliance of women-led organizations in the United States, and it works for uplifting women's status around the world. Jana, over to you.
Thank you very much, Gulali. Yeah, I'm Jana Renstrom. I'm the founder and president of the Quota Alliance. We're a US-based nonprofit organization for gender equality and women's empowerment. And we work for Sustainable Development Goal number 5, as well as all the other goals that are inextricably linked to it. And we support other women-focused nonprofits and women entrepreneurs out of New York City, but we're both local and global. Saba brought Aware Girls to us as a partner organization in 2017, and we're so proud of their work and of the individual contributions of Saba and Gulali. And I'm honored to be here today and also in the company of you other human rights defenders. I feel very happy in your company as I joined Amnesty International in Finland in 1974, and I have considered myself a human rights activist ever since. I also had the honor of meeting Professor Ismail when he visited New York during happier times. A Google search tells me that Pakistan integrated the SDGs into its national development agenda in February 2016, and Pakistan was apparently the first country to do so. And Pakistan has prioritized 6 SDGs, notably not including number 5, but including number 16, peace, justice, and strong institutions. And Pakistan is also a signatory to the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Clearly, Pakistan is not taking these commitments seriously, as it has brought these unfounded and fabricated terrorism and other charges against Professor Ismail and his wife, as well as placing them on the exit control lists, merely for supporting the right of their daughters to exercise their right to freedom of speech, to protest the violation of the human rights of women and girls, some of them conducted by members of the military. Pakistan and the world need more men like Muhammad Ismail, who empowers his daughters, even when getting abducted and thrown in jail, because he believes that his daughters must take their own decisions and should have their voices heard. We commend those lawyers and judges who navigate this difficult terrain with integrity, and we call on all good men in the country, on whom I'm sure there must be many, along with the women, to vote for politicians who can ensure that domestic legislation adheres to Pakistan's international commitments, and to throw out the men in power who continue to suppress human rights and women's rights. We call on the authorities to drop the charges against Professor and Mrs. Ismail and remove them from the exit control list, which so cruelly separates them from their children abroad. Thank you for inviting me here, and I'm sorry I have to leave to another meeting very shortly. Great to be here with you. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Jana, for joining us today and for staying with us throughout the and staying with us this far. I would like to acknowledge Tahira Abdullah, who is here with us today. She is also among the pioneers of Women Action Forum. Thank you, Tahira Abdullah, for being with us. Now I would like to invite Dr. Muhammad Thaki. He's a columnist, he's a medical doctor. He has a long-term association with progressive nationalist politics, and he keep on amusing us with his wonderful writing. Dr. Muhammad Thaki.
Thank you very much, Gulale. I really appreciate the opportunity to come out here and be with this really distinct group of politicians, rights defenders, activists, and Professor Ismail and Joseph Bibi. I've been following the whole proceeding today, and obviously there was significant health related concerns about Professor Ismail, and it's really heartening to know that overall he's doing okay. I can't really comment on his physical health, but one thing I can tell you, knowing him and knowing you, being his daughter who's tough as nails, as he and your mama have raised you, I can sort of second guess his psychological health, that he is in good spirits. It really takes the efforts of both parents to bring up children who would stand up for their rights and everyone else's rights. Somebody had said once that parents are the crossbows through which children, the arrows, are set forth into life. So perhaps that is one of the reasons that the so-called deep state in Pakistan is really offended by what you stand for and the environment and milieu that your parents have provided you. I would also like to express solidarity with many other scores, tens of thousands of individuals who have been forcibly disappeared, separated from their families, and their families, especially Baloch missing persons from Sindh, Muhajirs, and Pashtuns. Even from Punjab, there have been missing persons. We heard about the missing bloggers 3-4 years ago, and how their families were targeted and harassed over a period of time. Many of the speakers have already spoken and addressed the genesis of the problem, and they traced it back all the way through the history of Pakistan. I think most of us would agree that probably the first forcibly disappeared political leader or worker was Hassan Nasser back in 1960, who eventually was tortured to death in the Lahore fort. But the process has gone on unabated since. Perhaps the single most important reason for that was that there has been no repercussion for the perpetrators ever. While we have advocated for release of individuals, activists, and on many occasions, like Babar Saab, Senator Babar mentioned that the National Assembly Committee has taken up Professor Ismail's case. Perhaps it is time, and I think Hina Jalani alluded to that we hold our politicians accountable as well. And I heard Osama and Faria speaking about the PEMRA. Now, PEMRA, military courts, cybercrime acts, these regulations, draconian laws, are literally the rope that we civilians gave to the military to hang us with. And these terrible laws have remained on the book over the years. And government after civilian government, they have not only given this these tools of persecution to the military, but they have never really even given a rap on the knuckles to the military. We can go hoarse about what military has done, but ultimately we are political people and we seek solutions through political process. And the culmination of political process is for the political parties to actually hold the military accountable for its deeds. We should not be satisfied with these little things that come our way and proclaim that, oh, the military establishment has suddenly become neutral if it is allowing a certain election to go through, or if it is staying out of the Senate election process. And we have also noticed that whenever politicians have actually stood up, the military establishment has backed off, especially when powerful voices come from Pakistan's majority province, Punjab. It really forces the establishment to get its act together. The most recent example is how Mian Sahib Nawaz Sharif has actually put the country's army chief and the intelligence chief into a dock. And we did not hear the sort of backlash that otherwise would have come had a Pashtun or Baloch or Muhajir or a Sindhi leader said something of that sort, which is heartening. And to my mind, the advocacy and NGOs and all of us coming together through different dissident forums and watchdog associations, we need to focus our energies in asking the politicians to stand up, and especially the politicians from the majority province. I think they have a moral obligation to all the citizens of Pakistan, within Pakistan and outside the country. It is not sufficient where they would just talk about a certain voting mechanism. Eventually, these rights have to be wrestled back from the military establishment. No democracy is going to be complete without people being able to stand up, say what they want to say freely, and after that, have some semblance of safety. People should not be punished for speaking their mind. Journalists should not be punished for doing their job. Activists should not be punished for actually advocating for the downtrodden of our society at many different levels. I think one can go on and on, but I'll just stop here. Once again, my solidarity with Professor Ismail, your mother, your family, Idris Khatak's family, with Talia, and with tens of thousands of missing people and the people who are languishing in the legal limbo. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Muhammad Thaki Sahab, and thank you for also showing solidarity with missing persons and Idris Khatak Sahab and Talia Khatak. As I said that वो एक छोटी बच्ची है जो जिसे अपने बाप की रहाई के लिए जदोजहद करना पड़ रही है और हमें ही ताला खटक की आवाज बनना होगा. Now I would like to invite Elizabeth Humes. She is the president and CEO at the Alliance for Peace Building. Alliance for Peace Building is a US based organization, but it is an alliance of peace building organizations all over the world. And it is among one of those organizations who have stood very strong with us from the day one of our persecution. We know that usually NGOs and organizations, they like to stay away from issues which are seen as very political, but Alliance for Peace Building made a decision years ago that peace building is political and they will stand with human rights and peace builders around the world. So Elizabeth, over to you.
Thank you so much, Gulai. And I just want to say how grateful we are that you and Aware Girls are part of the Alliance for Peace Building family. We are so proud of the work that you have done. And we believe that civil society is the backbone of any democracy. We champion your work that you have done for girls, to give girls a voice, to stand up and say when something is wrong in a society. And we support you and your organization 110%. And we are grateful for the work that you do. Once again, civil society is the backbone of democracy. Nonviolent action, protests are the backbone of democracy. And you and your organization have done nothing wrong but speak out about injustice. And that is not illegal. And so we are saddened that your father is having to go through this for doing nothing illegal, but speaking out against injustice and trying to make the society better. So once again, the Alliance for Peace Building stands strong with you and your family. And we call on the Pakistani government to drop all charges against you and your family. And thank you, and stay strong.
Thank you so much, Elizabeth, for your comments. Judith, let me check if we still have Judith with us. I wanted to invite Judith, who was, okay, yeah, she had to leave. So I would now like to invite Hassan Mushtaba Sahab. Hassan Mushtaba Sahab is a journalist and he's also an exiled activist. He has been speaking out for human rights and on political issues for quite a long time. That led to his exile. He's also the co-founder of an initiative, the Exiled Jala Watan, which aims to work on the protection of exiled activists. So Hassan Mushtaba Sahab, अपने आप को unmute कर दें. आप अभी भी म्यूट हैं.
अब आ रही है आवाज मेरी?
जी अभी आ रही है आवाज.
Yeah. Thank you so very much, Gulale. I'm so honored for having me, and I'm here like everyone else to raise my left arm beside you in solidarity and support what you are facing with your family and with your great and brave parents. एक बात तो तय है कि पाकिस्तान جسے میں انٹیلیجنس ریپبلک آف افغانستان کہتا ہوں، وہ جسے پاکستان کی فوج یا ISI یا ملٹری انٹیلیجنس نے انٹیلیجنس ریپبلک آف افغانستان بنایا ہوا ہے، پاکستان اور یہ ادارے ایک ساتھ نہیں چل سکتے. They cannot go coexist together. یہ تو طے ہے. It's well settled now. اور آپ جو جدوجہد کر رہی ہیں، اگر پاکستان کے بانی محمد علی جناح کو کچھ سال اور ملتے تو ان کی بہن فاطمہ جناح بھی ان کی اس طرح کی آربیٹری نظر بندی کے خلاف جدوجہد کر رہی ہوتی، اور یہ تاریخ ہے. ہم دیکھ رہے ہیں کہ اسی محمد علی جناح کو بر صغیر میں اور سندھ میں، خاص طور اس دنیا کے اس حصے میں جس شخص اور جس لیڈر نے متعارف کرایا تھا، اس کا نام GM سید تھا، غلام مرتضیٰ شاہ تھا. وہ اس وقت آل انڈیا مسلم لیگ سندھ کے صدر تھے، اور انہوں نے سندھ اسمبلی میں فارچونیٹلی اور انفارچونیٹلی پاکستان کی قرارداد پاس کروائی تھی، مگر ان کی پاداش میں ان کو ساری عمر تا حیات نظر بندی یا جیلوں کا سامنا کرنا پڑا، جب تک کہ ان کی آخری سانس نہیں گئی. باچا خان کے ساتھ بھی یہی ہوا، جو بر صغیر میں صحیح طرح کے صحیح معنوں میں قائد اعظم تھے، اور ذوالفقار علی بھٹو کی بیٹی بھی آپ ہی کی طرح، جس طرح آپ اپنے والد کی آزادی کے لیے جدوجہد کر رہی ہیں، اور ان کے خلاف جو ریشہ دوانیاں ہیں پاکستانی ریاست کی، وہ بھی اپنے والد کی آزادی اور ان کی جو ہے جدوجہد اور ان کے لیے جدوجہد کرتی رہی. اور اسی طرح آج آپ اکیلی نہیں ہیں. جیسے آپ نے ادریس خٹک صاحب کی بیٹی کا نام لیا، اس طرح ہزاروں بیٹیاں ہیں. اور اس طرح جو ہے سندھ میں تنویر عالے جو ہے، سورٹ لوہار ہے، سسری لوہار ہے، اور بلوچ اور بے شمار بلوچ نوجوان بیٹیاں ہیں. ڈاکٹر مستونگ کے ڈاکٹر کی بیٹی ہے، اور بہت سارے لوگ ہیں. فرزانہ مجید ہے، کریمہ بلوچ تھی، اور یہ تمام بیٹیاں اپنے بھائیوں اور اپنے والدین اور اپنے جو ہے فادرس کے جو ہے ان کے لیے یہ جدوجہد کر رہی ہیں. یہ ملک کے لیے جدوجہد ہے اور آزادی کے جدوجہد ہے. اب فیصلہ پاکستان کے عوام کو کرنا ہے، پاکستان کے بلوچ عوام کو کرنا ہے، پاکستان کے پختون عوام کو کرنا ہے، پاکستان کے سندھی عوام کو کرنا ہے، پنجابی عوام کو کرنا ہے، سرائیک پٹواری تمام عوام کو کرنا ہے کہ فوج یا ISI اور ملٹری انٹیلیجنس ایسی موسٹ فیئر ایجنسیز کو ترجیح دیتے ہیں، یا ملک کو بچانے کو ترجیح دیتے ہیں. آج جو بھی صورتحال ہے اس میں پاکستانی عدالتوں نے جو کہ رکھیل ہیں، جج جو ہیں جرنیلوں کے، ان سے تو زیادہ توقع نہیں ہے، مگر میں انٹرنیشنل کانفیڈنس ہوں کہ انٹرنیشنل کمیونٹی ضرور جو ہے آپ کی اس کوئسٹ فار جسٹس میں ہمارا ساتھ دے گی، آپ کا ساتھ دے گی. آئی ایم کانفیڈنٹ ان یونائیٹڈ نیشنز، میں کانفیڈنٹ ہوں US یورپین یونین کا، میں کانفیڈنٹ ہوں انٹرنیشنل کمیونٹی کا، انٹرنیشنل ہیومن رائٹس آرگنائزیشنز کا، اور انٹرنیشنل کورٹ آف جسٹس کا، جو ہے لیٹر اور سونر ون ڈے پاکستانی جنرل will have to be presented for their crimes against humanity and war crimes. No doubt in it. I am optimist. تو آج کی جو صورتحال ہے اس کا میں جو ہوں I'm taking this opportunity and dedicating my poem to Professor Muhammad Ismail and thousands of Pakistani citizens and dissidents who are missing now are jail. وہ ہے میری نظم لاپتہ لوگ. If I'm allowed, I'm just going to recite it. نہ جانے کتنے چہرے ہیں، نہ جانے کتنی آنکھیں ہیں گم شدہ، نہ جانے کتنے چہرے ہیں، نہ جانے کتنی آنکھیں ہیں گم شدہ. وہ گم شدہ، میں گم شدہ، تو گم شدہ، یہ گم شدہ، سب گم شدہ، ہم گم شدہ، گم شدہ. وقت کو گزرنا ہے، وقت کب گزرتا ہے، پٹیاں ہیں آنکھوں پر، شور ہے جہازوں کا، اور سب اذانیں ہیں، نیند میں رہائی ہے، جاگ میں جدائی ہے، تیری کیسی دنیا ہے، تیری جاگ میں جدائی ہے، تیری کیسی دنیا ہے، کیسی یہ خدائی ہے گم شدہ. کوئی خبر نہیں لاتا، کوئی خبر نہیں دیتا، ये सारी दर्द दुनिया के उनके बस जिगर में है। पाकिस्तानी मीडिया कोई खबर नहीं लिखता, कोई खबर नहीं कहता। जो हमारे प्यारे हैं, आंखों के जो तारे हैं, जिंदा हैं कि मुर्दा हैं, आंखें हैं कि राहों पर, दस्तकें कबाड़ों पर, क्या कि कोई अभी आया नहीं, कोई अभी आया। गुमशुदा गुमशुदा खोलियों सलाखों पर, दर्द खौफ तन्हाई मौत से भी बदतर है। खोलियों सलाखों पर मौत, दर्द खौफ तन्हाई मौत से भी बदतर है। गुमशुदा बस गुमशुदा मूछे हैं जलादों की, तेल कितना पीती हैं, खून कितना पीती हैं, वर्दियां जलादों की, सर्दियां जलादों की, बेदर्दियां जलादों की। लोग हैं कि गुमशुदा, वो के मेरा भैया था, वो के मेरी बहना थी, वो के मेरा बाबा था, वो के मेरी मैया थी, वो के मेरा सैया था, वो के मेरा प्यारा था, वो के मेरी प्यारी थी, वो के मेरा बेटा था, वो के मेरी बेटी थी। घर से यूं जो निकले थे लौट कर नहीं आए, वो के मेरा बचपन था, वो के मेरा जौबन था, वो के मेरा साजन था, वो के मेरे प्यारी थी, वो के मेरी प्यारी थी, लौट कर नहीं आया। आसमां खा गया, आसमां खा गया, या ज़मीन निगल गई। गुमशुदा एक सिपाही जाते हैं, एक सिपाही आते हैं, दिल फड़फड़ाने लगता है जब परिंदे गाती है, जब परिंदे गाते हैं। ना कोई कचहरी है, ना कि कोई पेशी है, ना कि कोई छुट्टी है, ना कि कोई मुलाकात है, ना कोई मुंसिफ है, ना कोई वकील अपना, ना कि कोई दलील अपना, ना कि कोई रहाई है, दुहाई है। गुमशुदा बैन करती माए हैं, बेनिशान कब्रें हैं, सरबरेदा लाशें हैं, धुंधली को यादें हैं। गुमशुदा हम गुमशुदा, तुम गुमशुदा, सब गुमशुदा, बस गुमशुदा। शुक्रिया।
बहुत शुक्रिया हसन भाई आज और अपनी नज़म शेयर करने के लिए। अब now I would like to invite Menaka from Frontline Defenders. You know, Frontline Defenders has been at the forefront of standing out with the human rights defenders in Pakistan and across the world. Menaka.
Thank you, Gulalai. And I think a lot has been said, and just endorsing what the speakers before me have said. We have consistently called for the release of Professor Ismail and to stop the persecution against you and your family. And what we are seeing here is a clear reprisal a direct reprisal against your human rights work, and an attack on anyone who supports you, starting with your family. Standing in solidarity with you, all those present here, especially those joining in from Pakistan, despite the risks, and continuing to fight and struggle for justice. And not just in your case, but what we're hearing consistently is about the need for justice for all, including those whose names we don't know as part of the international community. What is highlighted in your case, in Idris Katak's case, and in so many others, is the limitations of our own work and the pressures that we are able to bring upon authorities within Pakistan to stand up to their own public commitments on human rights. This is a country where now bail has become the exception, where you arrest now and then enter into a voyage of discovery, and where families have to worry about planted evidence, fabricated evidence, and where security is not just about, surveillance is not just about your own privacy, but also whether things are going to be planted on you and on those you love, which will later implicate them. Numerous laws and the normalization of anti-terror laws being used against defenders is a crime, which goes against Pakistan's image that they try to portray internationally. And your case and so many others will be the court of justice that they are eventually, that they must be held to account for. And I think we will continue to stand in solidarity with you and your family. And thank you very much for giving us the opportunity to be here today with you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Menaka from Frontline Defenders. And thank you so much, everyone, for being patient. We are in the last section of our program, and we have just a few more speakers left to speak. Now, I would like to invite Ammar Rashid. Ammar Rashid, everyone knows him. Many speakers who are present here acknowledged his presence, his leadership. He's president of Awami Workers Party Punjab. He's a political activist, researcher. He writes in Dawn, and most of us have seen him with his guitar, going out to Kachi Abadis, going to different parts of Pakistan and campaigning for progressive politics in Pakistan. He is nowadays, he's the face of progressive politics of Pakistan, especially for young people. Ammar Rashid.
Thank you so much, Gurulai, for a very kind introduction and for the opportunity to speak here today. I think people have spoken of the details and the facts of the case. And before anything else, I would like to express my solidarity with you and your family and Professor Ismail for everything that you've been through. And on behalf of Awami Workers Party, we stand with you, and whatever is necessary for achieving the release of Professor Ismail, we will be with you every step of the way. I recently met Professor Ismail at Professor Naimuddin Khattak's funeral, who himself died in very suspicious circumstances. And I remember we were talking about his case, and he was, as always, in very good spirits, and he was laughing about the whole ordeal. And he was telling us about how it's very funny how whenever they want, they accuse us of being atheistic, secular, anti-Islam people out to destroy the Islamic fabric of the country. And whenever they want, they accuse us of being Taliban sympathizers and religious extremists who are plotting and financing terror attacks. It's just a reflection of how the truth in this country is simply a plaything of the state. They can take any position that they want on any part of the spectrum, and they'll present it with a straight face in the courts, in the judicial system, in the public sphere, in the media, and they expect us all to buy it. And in Professor Ismail's case in particular, it's absolutely ludicrous. It's someone who has spent his entire life speaking for peace, for secularism, for justice, and against extremism and terrorism in particular, would now be accused of financing terrorist attacks. And conveniently, terrorist attacks that the state has just remembered 8 or 9 years after they were committed, simply because they needed to silence the family of a political activist that they didn't like. And as many people have spoken, I think Professor Ismail's case is another one in a long series of instances of the abuse of sedition and anti-terrorism laws against political workers and human rights activists in this country. They've, of cases like Baba Jan, who spent 10 years of his life under anti-terrorism charges, completely absurd anti-terrorism charges, simply for being a popular leader of the people who spoke up for his people's rights. We currently have an elected parliamentarian, M.N.A. Ali Wazir, behind bars for over 2 months now, under, again, absurd anti-terrorism charges for simply voicing the grievances of his constituents against the state. I have myself been imprisoned for the same charges that Professor Ismail is currently facing a year ago for participating in a peaceful protest for the release of Manzoor Pristine. And I was luckily enough only in jail for a brief time for about a week. But in that time, I witnessed the underbelly of the Pakistani state's system of so-called justice. I saw their victims of enforced disappearances, Pashtuns, Baloch, people from Punjab, like working classes of Punjab, people, and many of them under absurd anti-terrorism charges, which has simply become a joke in Pakistan now. People slapped with them whenever someone needed to be silenced. I met their Baloch goat herder who had been implicated in anti-terrorism cases because his brother was a member of a separatist political organization. And the authorities admitted they didn't have any evidence on him. But like Fariha pointed out here earlier, it is the process that they use to implicate people, to shut them up in jails for years upon years, and not a word ever reaches the ears of most Pakistanis in whose name this is being committed. And just as a reflection of the balance of power in this country, when I was in prison, we were placed along with other AWP and PTM activists in the high security barracks, the lowest of the low parts of the prison, along with other terrorism accused and convicts as well. And the people, they said, and obviously jails often reflect the class system of the country you're living in. So there's B classes and A classes for maybe businessmen and politicians. But then the highest class in the jail, which was common knowledge, and this is what Diala we're talking about, was reserved for people who had committed terrorism across the border and who were actually convicted for it, but they were in the highest class of the jail and receiving the benefits of even having their family members with them and their children with them. It just reflects what the state's priorities are in this country, and rights activists were placed in the high security barracks. And another sort of, in Professor Ismail's case, I think, and in many other cases, I think what is also alarming is the tendency of collectively punishing family members for the alleged crimes of their relatives, and for the activism of their relatives. And this is like a form of guilt by association that is increasingly becoming the norm in how the state is choosing to deal with dissent. In this case, it's clearly simply a result of Gulalai and her role in the PTM and for speaking out for the human rights of the Pashtun minority in Pakistan. And similarly for other PTM members, we've recently had a case of Koche Levanai, a PTM Dubai activist, whose entire family's CNICs have been cancelled and their citizenship essentially has been revoked on the basis of the social media work of their family member. And there, similarly, people have mentioned the case of Akas Baraya. So there's a sense of collective punishment and guilt by association, which is now a part of the operative logic of the Pakistani state, which we have to call out and condemn at every step of the way. And lastly, I think in Professor Ismail's case, it's very important to point out also the targeting of his NGO work. And this is something that the Pakistani state has also increasingly criminalized over time. And targeted those NGO workers who choose to be a bit more political than the bulk of the civil society community, which is often somewhat apolitical. And I think this has to be called out, because this is the criminalization of NGO politics is not just a case question of holding certain organizations accountable. It's something that actively endangers the life of those who work in the civil society in Pakistan, as we saw recently with the killing of 4 women NGO workers in Waziristan. And basically, I mean, these are all elements that we need to be concerned about, but ultimately, the reason for Professor Ismail being targeted, and along with so many other dissenters in this country, is that we have a military establishment in this country that is not used to accountability. And they have for decades now enjoyed complete impunity for all their crimes. And now in recent years, we've seen the emergence of a new generation and new movements that are trying to, for the first time in possibly decades, to hold the establishment to account. And that is simply unacceptable to it. And so anyone associated with that, anyone who speaks their mind, who asks them to account for everything they've done, whether it's enforced disappearances, whether it's landmines, whether it's the use of these anti-terrorism laws, whether it's their constant interference in the country's political process, those people are being either abducted or charged with sedition and anti-terrorism laws. And I think in Gulalai's case, I think she's particularly dangerous for the establishment because she stands at the intersection of 2 movements that are calling the state out, one being the PTM and the other being the feminist movement, which is also asking very uncomfortable questions of the Pakistani state and its complicity in patriarchal violence this time. So I think the combination of these elements has made her a particular target. But I think at the same, it's ultimately, this is a structural problem. As someone pointed out earlier, it's a question of control over resources. It's a question of control over political and economic power. And in Pakistan, we have, the state has functioned as a rent-seeking state, a rentier state, for several decades, which is essentially a state which has survived by leveraging its strategic location to the highest international bidder. And as a result of that, it has simply like fattened itself at the expense of society. But at the same time, this is not a sustainable strategy for development. And we've seen the consequences of that in the last few years as the state's resources are drying out, its tax base is drying out, and the overall pie through which the military establishment has sort of fed on for so many years is now shrinking further and further. And unless the state allows for a process of democratization of not just political power, but also economic resources, and allowing people to partake and to share in what is produced in this country, and to allow people also to speak their mind. The question of dissent isn't simply a question of the protection of rights. It is the lifeblood of a country. It is what allows societies to grow and develop and evolve and create. And the Pakistani state and the military establishment has been stifling that for years. And if they continue to stay on this course, that will spell the end of this country as we know it today. And in the end, I mean, many people have much more distinguished than myself have already made these demands. I personally am not really a favor. I'm not a fan of like petitioning the state to ask it for mercy. I believe that the only path to make it listen, to make it release Professor Ismail, to make it release all the other abducted and disappeared peoples and all those others languishing in jails for dissenting, is through struggle, is through collective people struggle. And I think we stand at a critical juncture in Pakistan where it is absolutely essential for all affected people who have borne the brunt of state violence to band together, to join forces, whether it's Pashtuns, whether it's Baloch, whether it's the Sindhis, the Saraikis, whether it's women, whether it's farmers, whether it's workers, all those who have been excluded and marginalized from by this group of military and civilian elites to come together right now and struggle to protect our rights, to protect the rights of coming generations, because we cannot simply allow the same elite and the same dictatorial authoritarian mindset that has ruled this country for generations to continue to ruin further generations. So thank you again, Gulalai, for bringing us all together. And once more, I express my complete solidarity with you and Professor Ismail on behalf of your father, and we will do everything possible to secure his release and those of all others unjustly imprisoned for standing on the side of truth and justice in Pakistan.
Thank you so much, Amar Rashid. Now I would like to invite David Court. He is the advocacy and campaign lead at Civicus. Civicus is an alliance of civil society organizations globally working on human rights issues. David.
Thank you so much, Gulalai, and thank you so much to the speakers that have spoken before me. I think I've sat here, I've listened to colleagues speak passionately about Professor Ismail, about the family, and about the failure of the state and state institutions to uphold the rule of law and human rights. I think Professor Ismail's case is emblematic of the kind of restrictions that we're seeing all over the world. And for me personally, I have a relationship with Professor Ismail. I've known him for more than 10 years. He is a member of Civicus, one of the longest serving members of Civicus, and a passionate advocate for the Civicus Affinity Group of National Associations, where he represents the Pakistani NGO Forum. So when I was still quite young and just began work on human rights, I noticed that Professor Ismail will always attend Civicus events, whether it's in South Africa or other nations of the world. And one of the things that stood out for me about him was that at the time, I always used to wonder how he survived, his family survived, being passionate in a state like Pakistan. But he was the first to raise a hand and say he's standing in solidarity with other human rights defenders across the world. And I'm talking about something that he did over the last 10 years up until now. You know, he will always speak out when others are targeted, whether it's in Burundi or in Syria or in Ethiopia. When we raise these concerns, the Affinity Group of National Association has more than 8 national associations, and many of them focus on development issues. And so you don't get sometimes the passionate human rights voice that we need for a coalition, especially when one member is targeted. But I know consistently, whether it was a joint letter or a campaign, Professor Ismail will always stand up and raise his voice in support of human rights defenders. When Gulelai was still in Pakistan, especially closer to the period where she left, would have meetings actually in the office and would be worried about her, would be concerned about her welfare, would be concerned about the welfare of the family. And we're quite pleased to see that she left, albeit under very difficult circumstances. To us, Professor Ismail is a friend, is a family member, is a colleague, is a big brother, is a father, is a passionate human rights advocate. So we're taking this personally from Johannesburg and across the world. And we've been campaigning ceaselessly to get him released, but also to get all charges against him and his family dropped. I will continue to, Gulelai will pledge to continue to support calls for his release. And while we add our voices to colleagues who have called on the Pakistani government to release him and drop all charges against him, would also want to challenge, you know, the United Kingdom, the United States, the Norwegians, the Swedes, the Danes that have often spoken against human rights violations, to have these conversations with their counterparts in Pakistan, because it's unjust, it's unwarranted, and we need this family, you know, to live the lives that they're supposed to live. You are very courageous, Gulela. You are an example to all of us. And like somebody said when they were talking about Myanmar, the Pakistani government is not just messing up with a family at the moment, but they are messing up with a generation that will not take their abuses silently. We're really pleased to be part of this conversation. We're really pleased to be part of this movement that is calling for the release of our Prof, and will continue to support as much as possible from Geneva to South Africa, even to Islamabad, whatever it is that we need to do, we pledge to continue to do that. Thank you so much, and it's a great pleasure to connect with all colleagues. Thank you.
Thank you so much, David, for making a statement. Now I would like to invite Ammar Ali Jan. Ammar Ali Jan in Pakistan is known as symbol of frightens. You all may remember that how the establishment in the country see him as a symbol of fear because of the work he does and because of what he means for young people, and not just for young people, but also for the laborers. He is the founder of the Huquq-e Khalq movement, and he is the face of progressive politics in Pakistan. So over to you, Ammar Ali Jan.
Thank you very much, Gulelai. One thing I'd just like to point out is that it's always been a very common trait of authoritarian regimes to exile people. It is, of course, a true symbol of frightens that we're living under a government where people are forced to leave their homes and forced to call other exiled lands their homes. But it's also a symbol people in exile. They're the symbol of the incompletion of any totalitarian project, the failure of all totalitarian governments to control its citizens, to have a final victory against the people. So I think the fact that there are people who are not just leaving the land, but are refusing to obey a system that humiliates them, that takes away their dignity, their citizenship, tells us that there's still the possibility of an alternative. There's still hope for something else. So I think even if you're outside, you are making a very strong statement for all of us inside, that there is some outside, and we can still look forward to creating a different kind of a world. For starting from Iman and Rabia and Hina Jalani, everyone has laid a very clear case for the kind of terrible treatment meted out to Professor Saab, and how it violates all basic norms of law and decency. Because we're kind of late, so I'll just focus on one aspect, which is the fact that he's a professor. And authoritarian regimes like ours are particularly afraid of universities and media houses because they fear ideas. These are sites for the generation of new kinds of thinking, of thought processes that may not be easily integrated within the system. Ideas that might force people to think beyond what is deemed possible by those in power. So naturally, fragile governments, authoritarian governments, are incredibly scared of universities, of media houses, and even of books. I mean, we have with us Dr. Aisha Siddiqa, whose book created an uproar in Pakistan, and we have a larger history of banning books in Pakistan. And one of the markers of abducting young people in Balochistan, Sindh, and Khyber Pakhtunkhwa is whether they're reading the wrong kinds of books or not. So you can already see that there is a very tense relationship that power has with ideas. And the attack on Professor Saab should also be seen as part of this larger attack on critical thinking across Pakistan, where the state is attempting to impose a fictitious narrative on all its citizens, a narrative that starts with Mohammed bin Qasim and ends with the '92 World Cup and eventually Imran Khan's victory, a narrative that cannot be sustained in any serious historical sense, a narrative in which there's very little space for our cultural difference, for religious difference, for gender equality. And it's a narrative in which those who are, as Amar was speaking earlier, those who are actually have always acted on behalf of foreign powers, now have the audacity to tell the people of Pakistan that they are foreign agents. Anybody who talks about the constitution, anybody who talks about rule of law, anybody who talks about people's rights is a foreign agent. And this has happened to not just Professor Saab. I mean, for the last 70 years, we've seen, this allegation of being a raw agent, it's been used against Fatima Jinnah, Bhutto Saab, Bachar Khan, Murray, even Nawaz Sharif. Tomorrow it'll be against Imran Khan too. It almost seems like RAW is the most popular political party in Pakistan, because every popular leader in our history has at some point been part of RAW according to this logic. Of course, what is foreign to them is not these individuals or their supporters. What is foreign to them is the idea that anybody can challenge their power, is the idea that anybody can speak up. And that idea is so foreign to them that they connect it to territories all across the world, Tel Aviv, Washington, London, Delhi, because they cannot comprehend the fact that young people in Pakistan are willing to speak up now, are willing to learn, are willing to imagine a different world. I'll just end by saying, we also had Professor Hooper with us earlier. He has also been targeted, other professors have been targeted, students have faced sedition charges. this is, again, what we're seeing at universities is an attempt to control the thinking of young people. I mean, I'll just tell you one example of what happened, my one experience, where a colonel, a serving colonel, asked me to stop talking about politics in my class. Now, the problem is that I was actually teaching political science. So I was like, Colonel Sahab, you should be given a Nobel Prize if you're able to teach political science without talking about politics. I mean, we're dealing with dangerous duffers, as Asma Jahangir used to say. I've found over the years that they're not just cruel, but they're also very mediocre human beings. And of course, they'll be scared of people like Professor Saab, because he has allowed generations of Pakistanis to think critically, to think differently, to tell them that another world is possible, that those in power should not have a monopoly over our imagination, over our ideas, that these limits are man-made limits, they're not sacred, they're not to be sanctified. Instead, we can and we must think beyond these limits. And I think it's that space beyond the limit where generations of seditious people have met and continue to meet, and are meeting in this webinar as well. And it's a beautiful tradition that we must continue holding on to. Thank you, and solidarity to you and your family.
Thank you so much, Ammar Ali Jan. Now I would like to invite Basir Naveed Sahab from International Human Rights Council. He has joined us today from Hong Kong. Unmute करें अपने आप को बसीर साहब.
हाँ, कर दिया मैंने. आ रही आवाज?
जी.
अच्छा जी, थैंक यू वेरी मच फॉर दिस वेबिनार. और बहुत ही इट इज़ वेरी गुड और बहुत अच्छा ऑर्गेनाइज किया. एंड आई होप दैट यू विल आल्सो अरेंज सच वेबिनार and powerful webinar on different issues. And this is what you have made. This exile group is also a very good thing, and we all will join it. तो जहाँ तक के ये सारे मामले का ताल्लुक है, तो इस वक्त तो सबसे ज़्यादा जो फ़िक्र की बात है वो प्रोफेसर साहब की सेहत के बारे में है कि वो कोविड से निकले थे और अभी अंदर हैं, और उनको जो है वो अलाउ नहीं, उनको शायद कुछ और चीज़ें भी नहीं अलाउ कर रहे, मेडिसिन वगैरह. और चूँकि कोविड के वजह से ये बहुत फिक्र रहती है कि दोबारा से ना इनको हो जाए. तो इसके साथ साथ मैं बहुत कम बोलूँगा, इसलिए कि यहाँ ऑलरेडी 2:45 बज रहे हैं रात के हांगकांग में, और सुबह काम पर जाना है. देयर इज़ नो स्पेस फॉर वर्क फ्रॉम होम, यहाँ पे अब बंद हो गया है सब. तो ये जाना है तो बहुत ही कम बोलूँगा मैं. और ये है कि जो दिस केस इज प्योरली ए केस ऑफ विक्टिमाइजेशन एंड परसिक्यूशन of the human rights defenders or your parents, and particularly victimization for you and your father. तो ये है, लेकिन ये मुल्क और की तो बात नहीं करता, लेकिन ये रियासत जो है बिल्कुल ही नाकाम हो गई है कि लोगों को कुछ दे. और जब नहीं दे सकती तो फिर ये रियासत इसी किस्म के हर अपने चालें चलती है. और अभी इतने सारे लोग मार रहे हैं, वो डिसअपियर कर रहे हैं, और हुकूमत खाने खोल रखे हैं. अब इस मुल्क में ये तय होना बाकी है कि फ़ौज और मुल्लाओं ने रहना है या इंसानों ने रहना है. ये एक लड़ाई है, और इसमें यकीनन ये मुल्ला और फ़ौज चाहेंगे कि इस मुल्क को इंसानों से खाली कर दिया जाए. और इसमें ये भी है कि हमारा मुल्क जो है वो रूल ऑफ लॉ पे नहीं चलता है. एक थोड़ी सी डिस्टिंक्शन करनी पड़ेगी कि रूल ऑफ लॉ की जगह हमारे यहाँ जो है लॉ एंड ऑर्डर पे ज़्यादा जोर दिया जाता है, और उसको रूल ऑफ लॉ का जो है वो रिप्लेसमेंट समझ लिया गया है कि सारे कुछ जो भी डील करना है वो लॉ एंड ऑर्डर से डील करना है. اور اس لا اینڈ آرڈر کی ڈیلنگ میں جو ہے وہ ریاستی مشنری پہ بہت زیادہ خرچہ کیا جاتا ہے. آپ دیکھیں کہ ہر وقت نئے نئے اپریٹس، نئی نئی بھرتیاں، اور تو کہیں روزگار نہیں ہے، لیکن اسی میں ہی روزگار ہے کہ کس طریقے سے ریپریشن کو بڑھائیں، کس طریقے سے سوسائٹی کو زیادہ سے زیادہ اسکوئز کیا جائے. تو یہ اس رول آف لا کی جگہ جو لا اینڈ آرڈر نے لے لی ہے، یہ خرابیاں، اور اس کے ساری ذمہ داری جو ہے وہ ہے ہماری ملٹری پہ. نہیں، ملٹری پہ نہیں، جوڈیشری پہ. اصل میں ملٹری تو وہیں سے ہی اپنی وہ سینکٹیٹی حاصل کرتی ہے جوڈیشری سے. تو یہ جو جوڈیشری ہے، یہ اس کے خلاف ایک بہت بڑی موومنٹ کی ضرورت ہے. کہ شاید لوگوں نے ٹرائی کیا تھا چودھری افتخار کے وقت، اور وہ پھر ناکام ہو گئے کہ ویسے ہی جوڈیشری رہی. تو ہم کو جو ہے وہ تمام سول سوسائٹی کو رول آف لا پہ زیادہ بات کرنے کی ضرورت ہے. اور پھر اس میں لوگ وہ بھی اور دوسری بھی چیزیں بات کرتے ہیں، لیکن میرا اپنا خیال ہے کہ جوڈیشری کو ہمیں ٹارگٹ کرنا چاہیے. اور اس کے ساتھ ساتھ یہ ہے کہ ایگزائل میں لوگ رہنے کے لیے، میرا تو یہ ہے کہ میں تو یہاں پہ جو آیا ہانگ کانگ میں تو جاب پر ہی آیا تھا. یہاں پر میں کوئی اسائلم میں نہیں آیا تھا، لیکن گورنمنٹ نے میرا پاسپورٹ ضبط کر لیا ہے اور میری نیشنلٹی کینسل کر دی ہے. میرا تو دل بہت کرتا ہے کہ میں اپنے ملک واپس جاؤں، وہیں رہوں، لیکن پرویز صاحب میں کیا کروں کہ میرا پاسپورٹ بھی کینسل ہو گیا ہے، میری نیشنلٹی بھی کینسل ہو گئی، اور میرے کیس کو گورنمنٹ آف پاکستان نے، فارن منسٹری نے، منسٹری آف انٹیریئر نے کلاسیفائڈ کر دیا، یعنی یہ کہ بالکل ہی بند کر دیا فار ہول آف لائف. تو چلے یہ سب باتیں ہیں، لیکن اس میں جو آپ کہ جتنی بھی ہم نے ارجنٹ اپیل بھی نکالی ہے پروفیسر صاحب کے لیے، تو اور بھی جو کوئی خدمت ہوگی حاضر ہیں کرنے کے لیے. تھینک یو ویری مچ.
بہت شکریہ بصیر نوید صاحب آپ کا، اور رات کے 2:45 بجے تک ہمارے ساتھ رہنے کے لیے. اب میں چاہوں گی کہ میں ایمبیسڈر کامران شفیع صاحب کو دعوت دوں. انہوں نے he has worked as press secretary to the late lamented Benazir Bhutto. He has served as foreign ambassador to Cuba. So Ambassador Kamran Shafi صاحب unmute کریں اپنے آپ کو.
I'm trying. All right. Can you hear me now?
Ji.
Thank you very much. Greetings to everybody. And congratulations, Gulalai, for this great webinar you've hosted with such eminent personalities, such as Basir Naveed Sahib. What can I say about Professor Ismail? It boggles the senses. It completely astounds one that the deep state should arrest somebody who's fought against terror all his life on terror charges. I mean, it's beyond belief. That is where our country has come to today. It is totally beyond belief. The only hope I see is people like Ammar Rashid, people like Ammar Ali Jan, who are young people who are our hope, inshallah. But really, it breaks my heart when I see what's happening to your family and to your dear father who is recovered from COVID, and yet they've locked him up on totally, obviously, totally trumped up charges. I've always said, exactly like Ammar Ali Jan did, that the deep state should learn decency. Civilize yourselves. I've written repeatedly calling on our intelligence agencies, and you know who I mean. Please civilize yourselves, speak to us. Pakistan does not belong to you, as Professor Hoodboy said. It does not belong to you, it belongs to all of us. Just because you wear a uniform with some stars on your, or whatever's on your, I also went to the army. I don't recognize this. This is unbelievable. Some people even say, and I'm going to say it, that this is worse than Ziaul Haq's rule. He went after Mr. Bhutto. Yes, he did, because he was a dictator and an awful man. But the sort of repression that's going on today is absolutely unbelievable. The way they produce people, the way they disgrace people through their trolls, and they think we don't know. I mean, who doesn't know what they're doing? Look at the economy. The country is being led into a hole, and yet everybody's quiet because nobody challenges the deep state from the government. All tamashas, one after the other. All tamashas, one after the other. I won't speak too long because there are other people who are to speak and so on. I just want to say the solidarity with you, Gululai, and your family. And I send my greetings to Afrasiab Khatak Sahab and Ammar Rashid, who I can see on my screen. Good luck, everybody. God help us, I say. I mean, really, it's beyond belief what's going on. All the best.
बहुत शुक्रिया कामरान शफी साहब. अब हमारे चंद स्पीकर रह गए हैं जो हमारे कीनोट स्पीकर रह गए हैं. वैसे तो सारे ही हमारे कीनोट स्पीकर थे, लेकिन अब मैं चाहूंगी कि मैं बुलाऊं डॉक्टर आयशा सिद्दीका साहिबा को. डॉक्टर आयशा is a political scientist. She is a political commentator and an author who serves as a research associate at the SOAS South Asia Institute. She has previously served as the inaugural Pakistan Fellow at the Woodrow Wilson Center between 2004 and 2005. She is the author of one of the most interesting book, The Military Ink. Dr. Aisha Sahiba.
Thank you, Gulalai, for asking me to come today. What a wonderful event. I mean, it's a sad occasion. We are gathered here to, protest your father's imprisonment. But I feel that it's more than just about him and your family. It's about the freedom that Pakistan civil society needs. You are, in fact, through this event, raising voice for all of us, for all of the country, which has been caught in the clutches of, a very oligarchic political system where people are punished, people are being silenced in many ways. And there are many ways that the state has begun to silence people. There are people it has killed. I mean, at this moment, let me remember thousands of innocent Baloch and Pashtun and Saraiki and even Punjabi people who have lost their lives, who've picked up, who cannot go back. Let me remember, the people who have fought at Okara in Punjab against the state. I think there are a couple of points that I would like to make today, and very quickly. And first of it is that it's so nice to see so many people gathered today, and especially the young ones from Pakistan, Ammar Rashid, Ammar Ali Jan, even Gibran Nasir and many others who came and spoke, and Iman Hazir, who are fighting and they give us hope. But there is an issue. I mean, I think that despite that we have managed to come together, let's confront a reality, which is that the deep state in Pakistan has gradually weakened the civil society. What the problem that we have today is of a very strong state and a weak society. And that balance can shift. It's not just about people dying. It's not just about people getting together, finding events and moments to raise this voice against one person or many people. It's basically bringing in that intellectual honesty to stand up at every level. I mean, I'm reminded of countries like in South America, like Uruguay, and the transition to democracy. Now in Uruguay, one of the reasons the military and one of the ways the military was pushed back was because all parts of the society, formal, informal, the business community, the intellectuals, many more people, they all came together to forcefully say that they reject military in politics, which is what we need to do. We need to get rid of, push back the force. What Gulalai said in the beginning, that, pushing the military back into the barracks, the proverbial barracks. We want our politicians, our political class to take charge. But we also, and I think that requires much more amassing of intellectual forces and intellectual honesty with ourselves wherever we sit, whether we are professors, whether we are teachers, we need more people like Gulalai, and we need more people like Professor Ismail to speak for us and say what needs to be said. Having said that, I also believe that we are caught at a moment, and we have been, violence is not new to Pakistan, especially through the 1980s and even before that. Let's not forget what happened in East Pakistan, former East Pakistan, and now Bangladesh, when the military initiated violence against majority of its own population. Let's not forget that at that point in time, East Pakistan, Bangladesh now, was majority of population. That was, and force was used against them. People were picked up, many professors like Professor Ismail. I'm sad for that he is incarcerated, but I'm happy that he's alive. He's alive to raise his voice, alive to push back and say, you can imprison me, but I will speak the truth. In East Pakistan, that couldn't happen. Many of the people, many very noble voices were silenced by use of force. 1980s onwards, we have seen, the tribal areas in particular in Pakistan being, exposed to violence, and that violence has continued. That's been there. People have disappeared, and disappearances now have increased so much that have become visible, and they've begun to happen. Firstly, they could hide it by saying, all right, tribal areas, the heart of Pakistan, the mainland Pakistan, the plains of Pakistan, Punjab, etc., were not aware. But now it's begun to happen in more than many places. People are being silenced, not just through being picked up, but also being pushed out. Gulalai, in that way, I share the same fate as you. I cannot return home because of threat to life. I want to go home. I'd never imagined that, being away from home. I was always comfortable. I thought in my Pakistan, though it was hard, though things were not the easiest yet, you could sit there, you could criticize, you could talk. That Pakistan is gone, and it's gone in 5 years. We've begun to behave like the way China treats the Uyghurs. That's how the deep state in Pakistan has begun to treat its own citizens. So I think we need greater sense of responsibility in our own selves. People should realize, people should be made to understand how it's important for them to raise their voice. Secondly, I think we need to lobby with political parties, never to pass laws which strengthen hands of the deep state. What we've seen through so many years is a successive parliaments passing laws which have eventually strengthened the military rather than the political class, rather than the civil society. And finally, my point, which I think is for me is important, is that we are caught in a war. A deep state has always used threat to the state and the threat to security and national security as a reason to silence people. Pakistan has challenges. There is Afghanistan. There is the war, the Cold War of sorts between China and US and India. Let not the people be caught into it, in the middle of it. Let not the state be allowed to be, to use that excuse to torture and punish its people. And therefore, I think there's a responsibility of not just us, but people who work in human rights organizations, human rights defenders. Every single human rights defender, wherever they are, should remind their governments, remind especially those governments like the US, like the UK, and in Europe, to remind their governments to insist on Pakistan, to change its behavior towards its own citizens. We must involve, we must remind the world community, we must remind the big powers that have a role and have a responsibility, remind them that they also have a responsibility to push back governments like Pakistan, to push back governments like Myanmar, to push back governments like Egypt, where the deep states have become powerful and they've usurped people's rights and people's power. Gulalai, best of luck to you. I hope the day is not far when your father comes and joins you, and may we see the day when you and I and everybody who is exiled and cannot return to Pakistan can do that. And in the end, lots of salam to Kamran Shafi, to Afrasayab Khatak, to Tahira Abdullah, to Thaki, and everybody, every friend who is here.
बहुत शुक्रिया डॉक्टर साहिबा. हम सब अपने घरों को लौटना चाहते हैं, हम सब अपने ही घरों को पलट पलट कर देखते हैं और उस दिन का इंतज़ार कर रहे हैं कि पाकिस्तान बने इस तरह का कि हम वापस जा सके. मैं एक शॉर्ट स्टेटमेंट के लिए मुनीज़े जहांगीर को बुलाना चाहूँगी. मुनीज़े जहांगीर ने हमें ज्वाइन किया है. हम सब जानते हैं वो आसमा जहांगीर की बेटी हैं. वो वॉइस PK.net की फाउंडर हैं, जर्नलिस्ट हैं और एक नडर और बेबाक सहाफ़ी हैं, ह्यूमन राइट्स डिफेंडर है. मुनीज़े जहांगीर.
गुलाले, बहुत शुक्रिया, आपने मुझे दावत दी और सबसे पहले आपसे मैं इजहार यकजहती करना चाहती हूँ. आपने एक बहुत मुश्किल वक्त गुजारा है और आपके वालिदैन जो हैं उनको आज़ादी इजहार राय का जो खामियाजा है वो भुगतना पड़ रहा है, जिसका यकीनन हम सबको बहुत अफसोस है. और ऐसा लगता है कि अब शायद रियासत ने ये अपना एक माइंड बना लिया है कि जो आवाज़ें हैं, ख़ास तौर पे पश्तून आवाज़ें हैं जहां अमन की बात हो रही है, उनको क्रश करना जो है वो लाजम है. और ये बड़ी अफसोस की बात है, चूँकि जिस तरह मेरी वालदा भी आसमा जहांगीर कहती थी कि एक इलाका जहाँ पे आपने इतना वेपनाइज लोगों को किया हो, उनको कुछ ना दिया हो, ना स्कूल, ना थाना, ना पानी, ना गैस, और वहां से एक मूवमेंट उठे और वो बात करे अमन की, और वहां पे आप उस आवाज को क्रश कर दें और वहां पे लाके तालिबान बिठा दें, उनके घरों को मसमार कर दें और फिर उनको घरों को वापस ना लौटने दें और फिर जो आवाजें वहां से निकली उनको भी खत्म कर दें, तो मेरा ख्याल है कि इससे ज्यादा जुल्म और हो नहीं सकता. अगर हम एक डेमोक्रेटिक मुल्क होते तो शायद आप जैसे लोगों की ना कि यहाँ जगह होती, बल्कि आप लोग उस मूवमेंट को लीड कर रहे होते जो अमन की बात करते हैं, जो औरतों की इमेंसिपेशन की बात करते हैं. और मुझे बड़ा अफसोस है कि ऐसे लोगों को जो पाकिस्तान के हक में बात करते हैं, एक प्रोग्रेसिव पाकिस्तान की बात करते हैं, आज वो मुल्क से बाहर बैठे हैं और कहते हैं कि काश हमें वापस आने दिया जाए. मैं समझती हूँ कि आपकी जो जंग है वो लंबी है, तवील है, मगर इसमें आपके साथ बहुत सारे लोग जुड़े हुए हैं. हम एक ऐसे दिन पे बात कर रहे हैं जब कल सेनेट इलेक्शन है, जहाँ पे जिस किस्म का खेल इस्टेब्लिशमेंट खेलती है वो सबके सामने है, मगर फिर भी अपोजिशन जमातें जो हैं और सियासी जमातें, उनको एक कम से कम एक پیچا تو لڑایا ہوا ہے انہوں نے. تو میں سمجھتی ہوں کہ پاکستان کی جو عوام ہے وہ اس کے اندر ایک جذبہ ہے جمہوریت کے لیے, اور رات لمبی ہے مگر صبح ضرور آنی ہے. تو اس صبح کا ہمیں انتظار ہوگا. اور میں یہ ضرور کہوں گی کہ جو آرٹیکل 19 ہے جس کے تحت سب قدغنیں لگائی جاتی ہیں ہم پہ, اگر یہ پولیٹیشین جو قانون کی بالادستی کی آج بات کرتے ہیں حکومت میں آئے تو ہم ان سے یہ امید رکھتے ہیں کہ آرٹیکل 19 کو بھی اس کے پر بھی ذرا نظر ثانی کر لیں. اس لیے چونکہ یہ نہیں ہو سکتا کہ جو سفید ہاتھی ہے کمرے میں اس کے بارے میں کوئی بات نہ کر سکے, یا گھر والوں کے بارے میں بات کر سکے, باہر کسی کے بارے میں بات نہ ہو سکے. میں سمجھتی ہوں آزادی اظہار رائے کے ہم سب وکٹم ہیں, کی پابندی کے ہم سب وکٹم ہیں, اور میں امید کرتی ہوں کہ وہ وقت دور نہیں ہے کہ آپ بھی واپس آ سکیں گے, اور شاید عدالتوں سے کچھ امید ہو کہ آپ کے والد کو بھی بیل مل سکے یا ان کو بھی کوئی ریلیف مل سکے. بہت شکریہ.
بہت شکریہ منیس جہانگیر, بہت صحیح بات کی آپ نے کہ ہم سب آرٹیکل 19 کے اوپر عمل پیرا ہونے کے وکٹمز ہیں. اظہار رائے کے اوپر جو پابندی لگی ہے اس کے وکٹمز ہیں ہم سب. اب میں دعوت دینا چاہوں گی بشرا گوہر صاحبہ کو. وہ ممبر نیشنل اسمبلی رہ چکی ہیں, وومن ایکشن فورم کے لیڈر کے فور فرنٹ ایکٹیوسٹس میں سے ہیں, پاکستان کے سول سوسائٹی کے فور فرنٹ ایکٹیوسٹ رہی ہے. اور مجھے یاد ہے کہ جب میں اسکول میں پڑھتی تھی تو تب بشرا گوہر جو ہے وہ ایک تنظیم چلاتی تھی, خیبر پختونخوا کی سب سے لیڈنگ تنظیم سول سوسائٹی کی چلاتی تھی, اور ان کی کوشش ہوتی تھی کہ جو نوجوان ہے, جو لڑکیاں ہیں خاص کر, جن کے اندر ان کو ذرا سا پوٹینشیل نظر آتا تھا تو ان کو ہمیشہ سپورٹ کیا. اور آج ہم خیبر پختونخوا میں جو نوجوان لڑکیوں کی ایک لیڈرشپ نظر آتی ہے تو یہ کہنا غلط نہ ہوگا کہ بشرا گوہر کا اس میں بہت بڑا ہاتھ ہے. ان کی مینٹورشپ میں ایک بہت بڑی جدوجہد ان کی شامل رہی ہے. اور بشرا گوہر اور افراد صاحب خٹک صاحب, آپ کو بہت شکریہ کہ آپ نے پاکستان میں 12 بج چکے ہیں لیکن آپ رہیں اور انتظار کیا. تو بشرا گوہر, اوور ٹو یو. اب ان میوٹ کر لیں پلیز, 10 ان میوٹ کریں.
This has been a very interesting protest. Thank you very much for having me. More power to you, Gulale, for organizing it. I'm going to be very brief. I've known and worked with Professor Ismail, and I demand that he is unconditionally released. The charges against him are ridiculous. They're false. And, I've known Professor Ismail and your family for a very long time. We've worked together on campaigns for human rights, against religious extremism. We were together campaigning against the military mullah alliance's Hasba bill. And to say that Professor Ismail is a terrorist, that's ridiculous. It only shows that the deep state or the military has lost it completely. And I feel that we also need to understand that Pakistan is under martial law. And we can expect such things, and that is why our struggle must continue. We have hopes from our youth. The narrative that has been built by the state, that I call the insecure security state, is that Pashtuns are represented by Taliban and the terrorists. It is people like Professor Ismail who stand up and say, no, we have been resisting the Talibanization of Pakhtunkhwa and Pakistan. And so it is important to recognize that today we are being targeted because of our positions. Today, Professor Ismail is being targeted because of his position. He did not give in. He did not compromise with the military regime or the current military rulers. So Professor Ismail could have easily compromised, like many have. There has been talk about political leaders and engaging with political leaders. Well, the political parties have all compromised. They've all surrendered. They believe that they can only come through to power through Pindi. And so they've stopped engaging with the movements or with the public. Parliament has become irrelevant. It is being remotely controlled. And we have to question this parliament because it isn't speaking up for human rights. The puppet regime that has been installed does not have the power. So right now, I feel what is happening is what is expected in a martial law. We've seen martial laws, but this is the worst. And I think it is time that we all stand up. You keep asking those who participated in this protest to unmute themselves. Well, I would like to ask the political leaders to unmute themselves. Unless they speak up and they stand for human rights, we are going downhill. Pakistan has become the worst country for people who stand up for peace and justice. I'm glad that we have youngsters like you. Women have shown more courage. We've got the Pashtun Tahaffuz movement that has taken up and challenged the Talibanization that has been going on, the military operations. They're demanding a truth commission. We've got a few parliamentarians like Mohsen Dawar, who is our voice in the irrelevant parliament right now. So let us keep the struggle on. I know Professor Ismail is going to continue struggling. He has been doing it all his life. So by putting him behind bars, it's not going to affect him. It isn't going to silence him. I went to one of the hearings and there were many who were trying to advise him to be, to not speak up the truth. And he laughed them. He said, I'm going to continue to struggle. So Professor Ismail is not going to be frightened or pushed back. He is being terrorized. This is state terrorism against you and your family and Professor Ismail. He's not going to be silenced. You're not going to be silenced. So it is better if those behind all this repression understand this. We are for peace. We are for justice. We demand a truth commission. We want to know what is going on. It can't continue like this. So basically, we must continue, our struggle must continue. And I know that these tactics are not going to silence any one of us. So good luck to you and your family. I stand in solidarity with you. I don't have to say it because I feel a part of the family and will continue to support you. Your mother is a brave woman. The way she's handling this whole thing, in fact, she's also giving strength to all of us. Whenever I've talked to her, she's a brave woman. So let me just say what I think Hina Jalani said, that the military in Pakistan has messed up with the wrong family. And it is better that they understand this. we will continue. And Pakistan, we will not accept this, whatever they call it, the hybrid regime or whatever. We'll continue our struggle for democracy and human rights. And ultimately, the political leaders of this country will have to play a role. They can't just wheel and deal behind doors, talk about democracy and then sit behind doors negotiating for a few seats. I find this unacceptable, and we'll have to continue pressurizing our political leaders, and we have to unmute them. Thank you.
बहुत शुक्रिया बुशरा गौहर, बहुत खूबसूरत बात आपने की. You have said such strong words that political parties have to unmute themselves. Only then anything can change. And yes, I agree with you that the military establishment has messed up with the wrong family, because the only thing my father, Professor Ismail, has known all his life is to struggle. He has struggled against class. He has struggled against military dictator Ziaul Haq, went into prison. He struggled against General Pervez Musharraf. He went into prison. He struggled against Talibanization, went into prison. And now he's in the prison because his daughter is speaking out. So, but we have not, my father has never taught us to remain silent. The only thing that he has taught his children is always to speak out. And he has taught us from a very young age that speaking out in Pakistan come at a cost. It's costly, but this is our basic freedom, and we should not be put in a position where we have to choose between living in our country or speaking out, being alive or speaking out. So thank you for these really powerful words, Vijay. Now I would like to invite our hero, our Afrasiab Khatak Sahab. Afrasiab Khatak Sahab is a political activist. He is a former senator. He has served as the chairperson of the Human Rights Commission of Pakistan. He is a mentor to the emerging young leaders of Pakhtunkhwa and across the Pakistan. He is seen as an expert on the regional peace issues and regional regional security issues. Afrasiab Khatak Sahab. अफरासिब खटक साहब वैसे तो आप अनम्यूट ही होते हैं, लेकिन आज अनम्यूट कर दें अपने आप को.
Sorry. Thank you very much. First of all, I would like to congratulate you for organizing such a successful conference and for lining up a galaxy of activists from Pakistan, North America. Even we had a friend from the Hong Kong. First of all, let me congratulate you. It was great, and we had very productive, useful, important, significant interventions from different activist leaders and organizations, people who are representing organizations, speaking on behalf of organizations. Well, I would start by saying that Professor Ismail is a hostage. He has been taken hostage by an authoritarian regime who wants to blackmail his daughter, Gulala Ismail, his other daughter, Sabah, and a number of activists who are in exile. And I think they also want to make an example out of your family, just to tell other activists and people who are living abroad and raising their voice for human rights and democracy in the country. The effort is to send them a lesson that they can also meet these challenges, and they can also face these sufferings. But knowing Professor Ismail for quite a long time, as friend, as comrade, as somebody who struggled in the movement together. I mean, we were together in a movement. against Ziaul Haq's dictatorship, against class exploitation, against extremism, obscurantism. I'm confident that he will come out of this with flying colors, as he had done in the past. He has this very strong will and commitment. So I'm really confident about his. But as I said, he is a hostage. He's not sort of a prisoner charged for some really some offense, etc. That these are all just lame excuses. And unfortunately, we are treated the way British colonial rule would treat the so-called collective responsibility. The whole family, the whole clan, the whole villages would be arrested and tortured. So that is what is happening to your family, and we have to expose them. But when we see this, many of our foreign comrades, friends would wonder as to, aren't there courts in Pakistan? Isn't there parliament in Pakistan? Why are these institutions not intervening? Why are they not putting an end to this repression? Actually, they probably wouldn't know very clearly that Pakistan is under unannounced martial law. This so-called hybrid regime is just a facade of a martial law, which has really become very repressive. The way parliament is rendered irrelevant, sidelined. Judiciary is undermined. Actually, judiciary has been made the most insignificant institution and blackmailed. Judges have been blackmailed. We call it the video culture. They have videos against individuals and they blackmail judges, they blackmail bureaucrats. They have the so-called accountability mechanism to silence and victimize the political opponents of the regime, the puppet regime, the installed regime, which is just a facade for the military junta, which is really ruling the country, and for the intelligence agencies that are working like a government, like executive power, rather than being eyes and ears of the state, as by law they should have been. And it was rightly pointed out that this authoritarian regime is targeting political dissent, people who have a different opinion, and particularly people who speak truth through power. And we have seen the gross misuse of anti-terrorist laws, sedition laws, and other repressive laws, and laws that were originally framed to overcome terrorism. But unfortunately, the terrorists have a good time, because even organizations banned by UN, organizations banned formally by Pakistani state, are free to operate. They have offices. There's no ban and there are restrictions. From time to time, just as a propaganda gimmick, there is talk of a crackdown upon terrorism. But we have seen that crackdown cracks up before it cracks down. And terrorists really have never been at the receiving end of the strong actions of the state. But political dissent is, of course, the real enemy. The name of Idris Khatak was mentioned. He is a civilian social activist, political activist, a scholar, but he is being tried by military court. First of all, he disappeared. After a year he appeared. I mean, we came to know that he is alive and in the custody of military. Now he is being tried by a military court, which is totally illegal, which is totally over and above our constitution. But as many of our politicians see these days, that actually it is the military, the generals are not just a state within the state, but they have become a state over the state. And that is what exactly they are doing. And we also must mention that particularly the Pashtun part of Pakistan, Khyber Pakhtunkhwa province, is being treated very badly. The districts close to Devon line have seen the 3D strategy of the state. 3D means death, destruction, and displacement. We have seen millions of IDPs, internally displaced persons, but we call them intentionally displaced Pashtuns because they were displaced because of the state policies, and they are still displaced. Hundreds of thousands of people are displaced. Hundreds and thousands of people are missing, and we are facing a law which is for all practical purposes a martial law. It is called Action in Aid of Civil Power. It was supposed to be a law used for terrorists and insurgents who were fighting the state openly with weapons, with guns, with bombs. But you see, the same law is now imposed on the entire province of Pakhtunkhwa. And this law was struck down by the decision of Peshawar High Court. But unfortunately, the provincial government came on appeal to the Supreme Court, and this High Court judgment was suspended. So this law is still around. And this is a law under which the military can arrest people. And actually, in many of our districts, military is running the civil administration also. Military is policing. They go to homes, they raid homes. They stand on roads. But this is not really for security. It is for domination. They want to dominate society and state. And I agree with many of the speakers that our real problem is this unannounced martial law. This hybrid regime must go. We also appeal, we also demand from political parties to be very clear about the challenge that they are facing. It's not this puppet regime. It is the real power, the selectors, the military which is running the government, and we should have a program for bringing this martial law to an end. Some of our friends talked about reasoning, speaking to these generals. I don't think they will give up their power for our good reasoning, beautiful reasoning. I think they have huge vested interest. And I don't think they will leave power just like that. They will need a struggle. There has to be a struggle for the restoration of constitutional system in Pakistan. That should be the first and foremost thing for democratic movement in the country. Political parties are deceiving themselves. They will be just replacing this puppet regime by another puppet regime if they don't come out with open demand for ending unannounced martial law and restoring the constitutional system. And you see, and as long as there is no criminalization of enforced disappearance, how can you bring enforced disappearance to an end? We should have a law. We should have a truth commission to investigate, to inquire into all this, the so-called war on terror. And you see this, indeed, the new wave of terrorism that is emerging in our areas, the target killings that are taking place on both sides of the Devon line, Talibanization in Afghanistan, whatever is happening in Afghanistan, you see is launched from our side, from Pakistani side. So I think these are challenges, and they're interconnected. So in a way, the Professor Ismail is being taken as hostage by the unannounced martial law is actually as an epitome of the bigger crisis of state crisis, of the end of de jure rule. That's why judiciary is helpless, and the mechanisms for protecting human rights have broken down. For example, the National Human Rights Commission, which was formed under a law by the state, by the government, is dysfunctional for quite some time, because they don't want any human rights mechanism. NGOs have been arm twisted into silence, and many of them have been thrown out of the country. So I think we are facing a huge challenge, and we should prepare a long haul, a long struggle. We hope Professor Ismail will get released, if not by the High Court, maybe the Supreme Court after some time. But I think this wouldn't end the problem, because he may be arrested again, because others may be arrested, and they are being arrested every day. And we were talking about Idris Khatak, but there are Baloch missing persons, Kambarani brothers, Majid Baloch, Zakir Baloch, and so many others. There are Sindhi missing persons, Saraiki missing persons, Pashtun missing persons. So I think we have to get organized. I think your webinar today was a very good start for our struggle in the coming days. Let's hope we continue this struggle, and we will always be with you, and we think it's our struggle. And I'm confident, as Pakistani people have defeated dictatorship in the past, this dictatorship will also be defeated. People will overcome. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Afra Khatak Sahab, for such an amazing closing statement. You are right. This is not just about my father. This is not just about his release. He might be released and he will be arrested again, because my father will not be, he will not mute himself. He will keep on speaking out. I will keep on speaking out. The struggle will continue. Pakistan has to change its policy of 3D, that is death, destruction, and displacement. And it's not only my father should be released, but all political activists, all political dissidents, especially PTM activists who have been booked in different cases of sedition and terrorism, they should be released, because speaking out for human rights is not terrorism. The anti-terrorism laws, they should be repealed, and the Pakistani state authorities have to stop using cybercrime laws and anti-terrorism laws against human rights activists. And thank you, Afra Khatak Sahab, for reminding us about Kambrani brothers, Hasiba Kambrani, who she recently came to Islamabad along with a delegation of Baloch mothers and sisters who were protesting for their missing loved ones, for the loved ones who had been disappeared. Hasiba Kambrani had two of her brothers, one brother and one cousin brother, is missing for past 1 year. And before that, a few years ago, two of her brothers, they were abducted. And when she was struggling for the recovery of her brother, one day she was given a date. She was told, on this date, XYZ date, your brother will be returned to you. They cleaned their house, they made new dresses, they were waiting for their brother. And then they received a call telling them that the massacred dead bodies of their brothers are in hospital. That is the level of cruelty of Pakistani state establishment. So we are not expecting, we're not expecting anything good from them, but we are questioning the political parties. We are questioning people in whom we have invested our confidence through the vote, that they have to stand up for us. They have to take a stand, and they have to work together with us for changing the country, so that all missing persons can be released, so that all political dissidents can be released from the prisons, and so that the policy and the war economy, it should change. And while Amar Rashid and Amar Ali Jan was with us, so I would also kind of like to acknowledge that how important class struggle along with it is, while we struggle against patriarchy and we struggle for our ethnic rights. So class struggle is part of it. Without having equity and equality for everyone in the country, the war economy, policy of war economy won't change. All these women struggle, class struggle, and struggle of nations, all these things, they go hand in hand with each other. So thank you everyone who joined us via the Zoom forum. I have now 3 messages, video messages. One is from Murtaza Solangi, One is from I.A. Rahman Sahab. He needs no introduction. And one is from Mohsin Dawar. He has sent a thank you message to everyone. These are short 1 to 2 minutes video messages. So I would just play those messages and then would end this Zoom meeting. So let me, yeah. Murtaza Solanki Saab. Sorry, the Afrad Sahab, are you listening? Was the voice coming?
No.
Acha, I have
unfortunately.
So I will try with another video. अब आ रही है आवाज?
नहीं, तस्वीर आ रही, आवाज नहीं है।
ठीक है। Okay, so क्योंकि आवाज नहीं आ रही तो I will just share those videos. जो आया रहमान साहब का मैसेज है और मुर्तजा सोलंकी और मोहसिन दावर, but basically Mohsin Dawar sent a message of thank you on the behalf of PTM to everyone for coming today and participating in this online event. And Aya Rahman Sahab sent a very strong message to Pakistan for stop transnational repression of the exiled activists. So thank you once again everyone for being with us today. Afra Sab Khatak Sab, Bushra Gohar, Mariana for staying us, Amar Rashid, Amar Ali Jan, Aisha Siddiqa, Munize Jahangir, Iman Zainab, Rabia Mahmood, Tahir Abdullah, Osama Khilji, Marvi Sarmad, Fariha Aziz, और हुसैन अकानी साहब, हिना जिलानी साहिबा, डॉक्टर तकी, परवेज हुदबाई, डेविड काय और जूडिथ कनिंगम, जबरान नासिर, ओसामा खिलजी, हसन मुज्तबा, बसीर नवीद साहब, स्कॉट जैकब्सन, आबिद साकी साहब भी आए थे कुछ देर के लिए, और डेविड के, मिनाका फ्रॉम फ्रंटलाइन डिफेंडर्स, सिलाइल वर्थी, Juliet Roslo. Thank you everyone for joining us today in the protest. The struggle will continue. This was the first kind of event, and thank you for staying till really late with us. And we will continue speaking out. The struggle will continue in a much more organized way, because this is not just about one or two person. This is about all of us. This is about our country. This is about our constitution. Thank you everyone for joining today. Khuda Hafiz.
All the best. Khuda Hafiz.